Hey, what's going on? I'm Ryan Glick, co-founder and CEO of Groove. And if you're a real estate professional, I have something I think you're going to be interested in. We've developed a platform that's transforming the way deals are prospected and managed in the real estate world. With Groove, you can organize real estate data in one place and share real estate deals with just one click. Join other real estate pros and reclaim up to 90% of your time. Head over to letsgroove.com/signup and start your free trial today.
Well, we'd like to welcome everybody to a special Sunday evening edition of Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. And it feels like we're back. I'm nothing against Kyle yesterday. Don, I'm sure Kyle did a great job.
For a second there, I was going to respond with, "We are back, buddy boy," but that sounds a little too much
like Eddie?
Like Dolph or Eddie, so I'll leave it alone.
Well, it feels great to be back, Don. You and I recorded a preseason show here a couple of weeks back, and our good friend Kyle Spence, who is a huge help to this show, he filled in admirably yesterday. I was unable to be on the show. I was out of town and had some obligations that had been prearranged for a number of months, but we had this planned out for quite some time, and we'll make this a tradition. Whenever Coach Patterson or I, whether one of us is unavailable on Saturday, we will make this Sunday possible. And kind of nice to have a day to kind of digest everything we saw. And Don, especially for game one, I'm especially interested. I mean, I got a bunch of notes to run through with you. And full disclosure for everybody who's here as we talk about Iowa's 40-0 win against Illinois State inside Kinnick Stadium Saturday. Full disclosure, Coach and I have not talked about the game, and this is deliberate. I was going to call you last night, Don, but after I finished watching the game, I thought we need to make this as organic as possible. I want to express myself freely on here, and I don't want anybody to get the idea that this is a biased commentary between two people who have discussed it prior. So I guess if you don't mind, Don, because a lot of viewers who are here have already heard your perspective on the game. I did not go back and watch. I caught a little bit of the show with Kyle last night, but I did not go back and watch it in its entirety. So let me just kind of recap to everybody my response to what we saw yesterday, if you don't mind, Don.
Absolutely.
And I guess I want to start with the opening quarter, and this isn't a surprise to anybody. I was obviously very disappointed in Iowa's push up front. I thought the offensive line struggled to control the line of scrimmage through the first half, especially that first quarter. I'm interested to get your perspective on how much the talented linebacker core over at Illinois State, how much of a factor that was, as it relates to Iowa struggling to get that run game going. And I've been saying it for the last several weeks that Iowa's offense and success therein, especially in the month of September, will be dependent on how much they can run the ball, how much of a push that offensive line gets. So I was disappointed early. I know a lot of people look at the result and they say, "Oh, more of the same early." But again, I think all of us can accept the fact that although I think play calling has been an issue, player development's been a problem, offensive line play has been a big problem. Kirk Ferentz is not wrong about that. And so this offense is going to be dependent on that offensive line getting a push. So I was disappointed early. You had a 3-and-out to start the game on both sides. Very typical for Iowa football. I believe Iowa followed it up with another 3-and-out. Don, I guess before I get to the rest of my comments, just your thoughts on the first two quarters of football, and how were you feeling, as the clock ticked to 0 at the end of the second, and it was 6-0?
Well, I was disappointed, of course, that we didn't show ourselves better in the first half. I give a lot of credit to Illinois State. I think they correctly recognized I was going to come out and try to run the ball, try to be sure that they control the line of scrimmage. So they were prepared for that. Excuse me. Here's a key play early in the game, something to think about. I believe it was second quarter, based on where it shows up on my note sheet here. 4th and 2, you might remember we failed. Came up a little bit short. We were right around midfield. And what got us in trouble on that particular play, we went unbalanced. So we only had we had tackle over, I guess. So we had a tight end. I can't remember if it was a tight end or not. Anyway, we only had 2 players on the left side from the center. Can't remember if it was a tight end. I believe it was unbalanced. So I think we had a lineman and the tight end on the short side of the field. They brought pressure off that short side of the field because, no, the more I think about it, it was tight end over. That's what it was. Here's what you had. You had a guard and a tackle, and that's it on the short side, on the left side of the formation. We were running the ball to the heavy side. The only problem with that, sometimes when you go unbalanced, you don't know what you're going to get. Well, I give Illinois State credit for having a good plan for it. Their plan was, if you want to go unbalanced, we're going to whistle somebody off the edge, off the weak side that you cannot block. That's the guy that hit us deep in the backfield. That slowed our effort to get across and gain 2 yards. The running back did a decent job.
Yes, he did.
I believe it was Cory, wasn't it?
Correct.
Nice effort on his part, but he still came up a few inches short.
Yes.
So that was good football on their part, and I think they were correct to assume, let's do what we can to slow down Iowa, especially on early downs. And I was pleased to see, I think at the end of the half, I think we had 20 rush attempts, 17 pass attempts, which was better balance than what I expected we would have. But one reason we were throwing the ball is because we weren't running it very effectively. I think I did see, according to the TV people, 3.6 yards per carry at halftime on rushing plays. I did have somebody ask me before the game, Coach, I know you're confident we're going to run the ball better. What would be a good goal to have for Illinois State? Without even really hesitating too much, I said, well, I'd like to see 6 yards a carry. And of course, at halftime, we had 3.6. I think against Big Ten opponents, I'd like to see 5 yards a carry. I don't know if we can do it. That was maybe optimistic. I think we could. I think at the end of the day, we ended up averaging 6.2. But of course, we had the benefit of a 64-yard run, too. That helps.
Yeah, I believe it was actually 6 on the dot. I'm looking at the box score here.
Gotcha.
6 on the dot. And can we just dispel something real quick? I want to address something that gets tossed out a lot when you start talking about rush averages, Don. Sometimes we hear, people, Caleb Johnson had a 64-yard. Let me answer that phone call real quick. We'll put this caller on hold. We'll be right back with you, caller. But Don, Caleb Johnson had a long 64-yard run. And sometimes people like to take away that one large outlier and say, well, let's look at their average without that. Can you do that?
No, cannot.
The game, and everybody's averages are impacted by the long and the short runs.
Correct.
So there's no world in which that is a normal thing to do when evaluating a performance, correct?
No, one thing you do look for, if you want to run the ball with great effectiveness, you don't rely so much on average per carry. You rely more on how often do you gain 4 yards or more.
Okay.
If you're consistently knocking out 5-6 yards, that's a great thing, of course, because you're going to be hard pressed to even get to third down.
So why isn't that on a box score? Why don't they, put 4+ yard runs on a box score?
Well,
that would
frankly,
be a stat to have.
It would be. I think what would throw that off maybe is I'm at a draw play for 10 yards on 3rd and 15. That affects the average too.
Sure.
But the general thing we're looking for on first down, 4 yards or more. Minimum of 4. That's the definition of a good running game. So now you're second and medium, and now they don't know what you're going to do.
So let me go back to my original question, and I want to give this to you again. I know you talked about the 4th and 2 play that came up short. Kamari Moulton, I think, right now, based on what I saw yesterday, and people are going to disagree with me, I saw why he's number 1 on the depth chart. And it's not because Caleb Johnson was suspended. I think he's the best running back in the room right now. And I was saying the same thing about LeSean, at least yesterday. Kamari Moulton, to me, look like the best running back in the room. Would you agree with that, Don?
I don't know. It's debatable. I'll say this, and now we know what the facts were, of course. Cory started the game. Did he start because he had proven himself as the best back during camp, or did he start the game because number 2 wasn't available?
Well, hold on. Let's clear something out. Caleb has not been the starter. Has not ever been at the top of the depth chart. It's always that's why. And one of our good callers who I
correct me if I'm wrong. Now, 2 years ago he was a starter in any number of games, right?
I think that's yes. I think everybody's been a starter. I think Jazz Patterson was on number 1 on the depth chart at some point. That's another question. Where's Jazz Patterson? I don't know if that was asked of anybody yesterday. I didn't hear that question posed to Seth Wallace. But I guess the reason I want to ask that question is because, and one of our avid listeners reached out to me and said, "Hey, it makes sense as to why Cory is at the top of the depth chart because Caleb Johnson is out." And I just want to clear that up because I understand where that individual is coming from when they say that. And if other people feel the same way, I get it. But LeSean has been the number 1 guy.
Right.
So there's no reason to believe that why would Cory skip Caleb? Why would he jump Caleb and LeSean just because Caleb is out with a suspension? You see what I'm saying there?
Yeah. And let me comment on the numbers. Let me comment on our rushing totals yesterday, individual rushing totals. I made the comment shortly after the game. I said, do not fall into the trap of strictly judging each of the individual backs and basing your thought process on yards per carry. I think what happened in that game, I think we did a good job of wearing down Illinois State. Defensively, we did a good job of wearing them down. It was a warm day, warmer than I expected. It was even warmer on the turf. I will guarantee you that a lot of those Illinois State players were exhausted with the way the game played out. So judging a rushing average in the first half is entirely different than judging a rushing average in the second half, simply because we were doing a better job of creating a lot of running room in the second half than we did the first.
So again, the 64-yard run for Caleb, obviously impressive. Don, his breakaway speed, we all know, and we have known that his breakaway speed is special. He's got that long stride. It obviously helps him once he gets in the open field. He's not your quick twitch back. He's never going to be that. I'd still like to see him get low. I understand it's more of a challenge when you're taller to get low, just like it was with Hayden Large at fullback. However, there are guys like Derrick Henry who get that job done, and I hope that's part of Caleb's growth as a running back. And, it sounds like it was a violation of team rules as to the reason why he was suspended for the first half of the game yesterday. But I was impressed with Cory Moulton in spite of the average looking like it does, because I do feel like things opened up more in the second half. And it didn't look to me like that was due to who was taking the ball from Cade McNamara's hands. So that would be my one observation, Don. As it relates to quarterback play, that's what I want to address next, because we've seen the numbers. They've been well publicized over the last 24 hours. Cade struggled early and often. He had a potential touchdown throw to Luke Lachey in the first half that was actually it was a good route by Luke. He had beaten the defender, and McNamara underthrows him in the end zone. Would have been
the defender, incidentally, was lined up as a linebacker. We had what we wanted. We had Wyseam versus a linebacker who was in a trail position, and we simply need to get the ball over that defender and give Luke a chance to extend for the ball and create a touchdown.
And he likely catches that. If it's put on the money, he likely catches that.
He very likely catches it. The ball was simply underthrown. I think the announcing crew mentioned he threw it off his back foot. That's true. Need to transfer your weight a little bit to be able to get the ball on target and not leave it short. It was left a little bit short, and of course that gave him a chance to play the ball.
There was another play later in the first half in which Cade McNamara threw. This was, I think, even a worse pass, low and behind Reese Vanderzee on a potential first down throw. That was another low light, if you will, for Cade in that first half. Second half, Obviously, Cade was better. I was impressed with a couple of plays, as a couple of even one that was called back due to I believe it was a holding penalty in which Cade rushed for like 20 yards. And you just saw his mobility. He's a little bit more comfortable with his feet right now than I would have expected for a guy who's coming off that serious knee injury. Don, I think that's a positive to take from what we saw at Cade yesterday. Is he seems more comfortable in the pocket, not only than what we would have expected with Cade, but more comfortable than any recent quarterback Iowa's had taking snaps.
Yeah, I think so. I think he started to gain confidence at the end of the first half. You know, we put up pretty good yardage there in the last 5 minutes, I'd say, the second quarter. Even though it was only 6-0, at least we started to move the ball a little more efficiently. And of course, what made the difference in the game, let's back up as to how a penalty will affect the game. You might recall the second half kickoff, they received the penalty for a personal foul. As a result of that, we got to start off on the minus 40-yard line. Our first touchdown drive in the second half was only 60. Should have needed to be 75, right? Because we were going to take over on the 25. So that did help. But we had some nice plays. I want to give Tim a lot of credit for a couple of very well-conceived plays. Let me find them. I made a comment and gained confidence in the first half, early second half. Our counter helped our running game in the second half. We came out with that. We also unveiled a screen pass, even though we didn't throw one in the first half. That also helped. That was another 8 yards. But the 31-yard touchdown pass, that was the second in the quarter, wasn't it? Yeah. The second one, that was a well-conceived play because it looked like Gill was breaking outside, and then he broke back across the face of the safety and was open for a 31, is that right? 31-yard touchdown. A very well-executed play. It was properly envisioned. It was called in a good time, and we made them pay. A good throw, an excellent catch. Incidentally, Gill had a couple of really, really good catches in the game. Yes, so I'm impressed with him. It looks to me like he can be counted on to be a clutch receiver. Pretty obvious right now. If we're only going to put 2 wideouts on the field, and let's say right now, Cory, what our number one personnel group is, our number one personnel group, at least for this game, was very clearly 12 personnel. 1 back, 2 tight ends, which of course leaves room for 2 receivers. It was obvious those 2 receivers, in general, were going to be number 5 and number 15. Those are the guys that deserve to be out there if we were only putting 2 receivers out there. And it's pretty amazing that one of them's a true freshman. But he gave a good account of himself. At least he appears to be really reliable in catching a football. That's important. And of course, he really took Cade off the hook on that other touchdown pass, because that ball should not have been thrown. Frankly, we should have gotten out of the play. There were 2 rushers on the weak side, and we had 1 back to block them.
Can I address that real quick? And then we've got our caller that's been waiting for a while now, Don.
Sure.
I just want to address that throw by Cade, because the average football fan that watches that looks at it and they think, what a cool, great play. And that play could have easily been an interception. It was a terrible decision by Cade to throw into coverage. Not only is he throwing off his back foot, he's falling. It's like a Dirk Nowitzki type of fadeaway throw down the field. It was a bad decision with a guy in his face, and Reese Vanderzee just went up and got it. And that's a luxury to have, right? You have a receiver, especially a true freshman, that can go up and get that with his size. And obviously,
he did a good job of playing the ball. He did a good job of high pointing the ball. Fortunately for us, the Illinois State DBs did not do a good job of playing the ball. They were more preoccupied with covering receivers than finding the ball.
But that play had very little to do with Cade McNamara. I hate to say that. Like, that is not a good decision. That is a better play by Reese Vanderzee. So I just want to say that. I mean, again, Cade made some nice throws. I thought he made the touchdown throw to Jacob Gill. I mean, it just seemed to me yesterday, Don, and I understand we're talking about an FCS opponent, Missouri Valley Conference opponent. It was picked 5th in the conference. They are preseason top 25 in the league, or nationally in that division. But it did seem to me like there were more guys open than we've seen even in past opening week games, right? It just seemed like there were guys getting open. And we don't see that often.
You've heard me state that part of our problem is simply we're not getting great separation from defenders. So part of the quarterback's problem is the receivers need to be better at what they do. And we took advantage of some mismatches in the game. But let me say, it's going to be a lot more difficult next Saturday because ISU secondaries above average, I'll say for sure, in the Big 12.
All right, let's go to our first caller. Thank you for calling our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Who's on the line?
This is Trent. How you doing?
Good, Trent. How are you?
Good. Just first off, just off the script a little bit, just want to shout out, I'm a huge Packer fan. So, I kind of want to give a shout out to Aaron Catman in being inducted into the Packer Hall of Fame this week.
Very cool. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know it's cool. I saw his speech, and so I just wanted to mention that. Going on to the game, the first series was like really frustrating because it was like run, pass, and I'm like, we're doing the same thing. It's just like what changed? And it was like, I don't know. It was just kind of like crazy with that. But as the game went on, like Coach Don said, was like, okay, well, Cade's getting his legs in him. He's getting game reps, and it was about reps. And I think that once he settled in, especially going into that second half, he got his sea legs a little bit and was able to find some routes and getting some things going. Granted, it's Illinois State. I get that. But what I saw was just staying together, keeping together as a team, and just, finding a way. And when you think about it, when was the last time we scored 40 points?
Last September.
I don't.
Yeah, they scored 40 against Western
Don,
Michigan.
I don't remember it.
Yeah, it was against Western Michigan.
Western Michigan 41.
And ironically, it was a similar game in that Iowa really struggled in that game in the first half. And it wasn't until the second half that they pulled away. And that's the game where Kamari Moulton got a lot of snaps. Not saying there's a direct correlation between Kamari Moulton playing a lot and Iowa scoring a lot of points, but they got to score 40 against somebody else. Obviously, we recognize that. But you're right, caller. It doesn't happen often.
No, it doesn't. And the one thing I did see that was a little different was motion in the offense, where they were doing a lot of motion, taking the receiver, coming around the offensive line, going around. I did like seeing that, where that really looked positive in a lot of ways. So they're running some different scheme, which I like. But I think it was just more. I remember watching Big Ten Network. I was watching a game on Big Ten Network, and DiNardo at halftime was just basically put Brennan Sullivan in now. And I'm like, no, let's give this another half. Let's see what happens. I couldn't believe it. He was ready to pull the trigger. And I got to be honest with you, I kind of was too. After that first half, I was like, okay, this is not working. But I think what happened, at least in my opinion, and I could be wrong, I think in the first half, Cade was still thinking about his injury, thinking through that, still worried about that. And once he got into the flow of the game, that kind of went away, and he started playing like Cade does, and he started doing what he does. And I feel like he just got into the flow of the offense and was able to work a lot better. So, I kind of see where Kirk's coming from, where he wanted to go with Cade. I'd like to see, eventually Brendan play in there. Why can't we go to a 2-quarterback set and try to mix it up a little bit?
Well, I appreciate your call, sir. We're going to definitely talk about quarterbacks. Any parting words for Coach Rai?
I'm sorry, Cory.
No, not at all. I appreciate the time, and thanks for taking my call.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the phone call. Yeah, I want to address Trent's comment on quarterback, because that would be the next thing I wanted to bring up. And I've been accused of coming on here and just complaining at times. Not much to complain about when you win 40-0. So I'm kind of finding things, because we always hear, Don, and it was brought up earlier in the chat, coaches always say, including Kirk, including yourself, Don, that the biggest improvement in season usually comes between weeks 1 and 2. And the reason I bring that up is, let's talk about the things that are concerning, because we're going to spend plenty of time talking about the positives that came of this. We've already talked about Cade's second half. I was impressed with special teams, although penalties need to be cleaned up. I really like Caden Weegan returning punts. I thought it was interesting that we got a little dose of Zach Lutmer there as well. That looked like a little, maybe a test tube experiment, if you will, on special teams. To address what Trent said, and it is also brought up here in the live chat by Ron, I couldn't agree more with Ron. Disappointed Sullivan didn't play when the game was 33-0 at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Don, I was wrong on something, and I'll readily admit it. I've been saying for weeks that I thought Iowa would play 2 quarterbacks. And Brendan coming in with a minute and a half to go, that does not quantify. That was not qualifying, all right? I was wrong on that. And you were wrong on that, Don. You said the same thing. We both thought that they would go with multiple guys. You hope they got Marco in there for a little while. And I guess the reason I bring this up is they played more guys than they typically do.
Tell me another position that didn't see number 2 get extensive playing time.
They played more guys at other positions than they normally do early in seasons. Like we saw, here, let me give you an example. You have Caden Weegan come in and look terrific. And if it's not for a stupid block in the back that probably didn't make the difference on a play, he would have had a return for a touchdown, had a couple of nice returns, looked the part. I mean, that dude looked great in his limited amount of time. He's fearless.
I'll make this comment. He thinks he's Tim Dwight.
Yeah. Hey, great. He
Nothing wrong with thinking that way.
He reminded you of Timmy. He reminded me of Charlie Jones and Cooper DeJean. Those are great names to be in the company of early, at least at first glance. He didn't muff any punts, even though you can tell he is fearless. So I guess
there was one ball he should have fair caught, incidentally.
I agree.
Because that ball might have come out.
But Don, here's my point. He looked the part. And yet we still saw Zach Lutmer for multiple punt returns in the game. With the game in doubt, we still saw Zach Lutmer. All right. I think that's notable.
What I didn't know was if Weegan had crapped up a little bit at that point in time. I don't know.
Okay, could be. So if we want to make that argument, fine. But let me go to a couple other positions. We saw Cohen Entringer get time earlier than certainly quarterback. We saw who else did we see in there? Obviously, we saw a heavy dose of. You're going to see a heavy dose of defensive linemen.
Lots of tight ends.
We saw lots of tight ends. Johnny Pascuzzi played. We saw Zach Ortworth get a lot more action. He looked good. Had a nice catch down the left boundary. Again, I'd have to go back and look, but it just seemed like the number of guys that played. You would think, based on everything we've been told and everything I've been told and seen through fall camp, that Brendan Sullivan, if all those other guys are deserving of playing time that early in a game, Brendan Sullivan is deserving of some playing time. I'm not talking about making a change. Like I get if Jerry, I didn't listen to halftime, but if Jerry DiNardo said, hey, pull the plug, it's time to put Brendan in, I don't know that I agree with that.
Right.
I've never been an advocate for that. What I'm an advocate for, Don, is having a few plays ready for a guy who's proven himself to be ready. They do it on special teams. They do it on defense. They do it on offense at other positions. Why is quarterback so different, Don?
Yeah, I found myself thinking this way, Corey. Second half did not go well for our team. Did not go that well for Kate either. But my rationale was, well, at least we got the rust off in the first half. Second half's going to be a lot better, and it was. Well, Brendan Sullivan, we need to get the rust off him too, because we might need him. We might need him next Saturday.
Correct. I agree. I guess my biggest complaint, I get it, like early in the third quarter, even late in the third quarter, early fourth, Don, when Cade was starting to get it rolling. I understand not pulling him when you're struggling, right? I think there's a psychological factor there. You don't want to just pull a guy and make him feel like he's getting benched because of his performance when he's trying to beat off the rust. So I can kind of understand sticking with him through the trials. I understand sticking with him through the third quarter as he's gotten it rolling and wanting to keep that momentum going. I get it. What I don't get is when you're up 33-0 late and he's still in the game. That's what I don't understand. I wasn't even asking for Brendan, to be taking an entire drive in the first half. But 33-0, I don't understand why Cade McNamara is still in the game.
I did make a note of it because I didn't realize, just sitting out in the crowd, we actually saw 3 Illinois State quarterbacks. We saw 2 of them in the first quarter. Of course, the backup played a lot. They clearly have a 2-quarterback system. They're comfortable putting in the other guy. And what are they going to call? They're going to call the plays that work best for him. It only makes sense. It gives you a chance to have more variety in your offense. If you've got a different guy as a signal caller, they can do different things. It's like putting a multi-talented quarterback out there that's capable of doing so many more things. You're using 2 guys to get it done, but that's better than not getting it done.
Yeah. Again, I'm yes, it's nitpicking to some extent, but what happened last year? They go with a guy in Deacon Hill who was not ready. And although I think they were already without Brendan Sullivan playing a single snap in an Iowa jersey, now he has played a couple of snaps. He handed the ball off several times yesterday at the tail end of the game. But without Sullivan even playing a real snap, a meaningful snap, he's already in a better position than Deacon Hill ever was. However, my point is we've seen the downfall involved with not having your backup ready to go. And you and I talked about how consequential games 1 and 3 are, because every other game is a game against a Power 4 opponent. You've got Troy and you've got Illinois State. And let's be honest, Don, Troy is a lot better on paper than Illinois State is. They just are.
Yes.
I mean, they're winning 10, 11 games in the FBS. Illinois State's winning 6 games in the FCS. And a good Missouri Valley Conference in the FCS, but there is a difference there, Don. So it's going to be hard to get in a position where you're up 33-0 with the option of putting Brendan in against Troy. And if you haven't done it now, it may not happen.
Well, Troy's one of those teams in recent years that is routinely playing better than their name. They're the kind of team that week in and week out, people would say, wow, I didn't see that coming. Troy actually pick your SEC team. Troy actually played a really good football team and played them tough. Well, yeah, Troy's better than their name.
Okay.
I am curious what they did yesterday. Do you know if they played yesterday? I assume they did.
I will. Well, we're going to hit a quick commercial break, and then I'll be able to tell everybody that. Before we get to our next caller, I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. One being Brad Van Meter and his team down in Des Moines, down on Fleur Drive in Des Moines. Just visited Brad in his office here a few weeks ago. He and his team are working around the clock to get their customers great deals on auto insurance, homeowners insurance, life insurance. I know homeowners rates have gone up across the country. Give Brad and his team a call and see how they can help you save money on whatever insurance policies that you have. 515-256-6480. 515-256-6480. Or visit him online at bradvanmeter.com. They're all Hawkeye fans down there. And I can tell you that, again, firsthand experience. Had a chance to sit down with Brad and his team just a few weeks ago. Again, that's 515-256-6480. And, of course, Iowa Smokehouse, they continue to support the show. We certainly appreciate Iowa Smokehouse, and they are doing great things in the snacking industry and providing great products for Hawkeye fans across the state and across the country. You can now order their products online and get 15% off by ordering through our show. So here's the deal, folks. Use the code Hawkeyes at iowasmokehouse.com for a better quality snack for game day or any other day. Check out all they have to offer, iowasmokehouse.com, whether it's their beef jerky, their meat sticks, their steak bites, or even their ketchups and barbecue sauces. They've also got great salsas. Tasting is believing. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your total order at iowasmokehouse.com. All right, we're going to get our next caller on here, and as we do that, I'll get you that information on Iowa's third opponent, and of course, we'll get to Iowa State and all that. I've got more notes to run through from yesterday's game, Don. Let's go to JT, who's been on hold. JT, welcome.
Hey, I was just going to bring up the score from the Troy game for you.
Okay.
They lost by 2 to Nevada.
Okay.
26-28. Troy did have just short of 600 total yards offense, but they
Yeah.
gave up just short of 700 total yards.
Well, did they play at Nevada?
It was at home. It was at
At
Troy.
home.
Yeah.
Well, it
Okay,
sounds
and
like
just-
they have issues on defense at least.
Yes, I would say they have issues on defense. And just for the record, if people want to know, because it's really hard to evaluate a team against another team, two teams that haven't played yet. But for people that want to know, Nevada was picked dead last in the Mountain West. They were picked 12th in the Mountain West. So if that's any indicator, maybe Troy will not be as difficult of a game as we initially thought, but we'll see. Who does Troy play next week, JT?
I believe they play Memphis. Yes, Memphis.
Well, that will probably be an even bigger test, and so we'll see how that defense, again, largest improvements, not just for Iowa. The biggest improvement for a team comes between week 1 and week 2. So that coaching staff will be tested after giving up those types of numbers.
Yeah. So I had one question for Coach here. I noticed on a lot of plays, run plays, where we go to the strong side, we'd leave a weak side backer coming around the edge and let our running back go one-on-one with that weak side backer. Is that supposed to be by design, or is our tight end / left tackle, right tackle supposed to get a chip on him, then go to the next level? Or are we just letting it be designed one-on-one, your guy beat our guy?
Well, if they bring a wide rusher off the split side and you're running a strong side play, he's very definitely a threat to get to the ball carrier behind the line of scrimmage. You saw it any number of times yesterday. You better have a plan, because sometimes it was actually a free safety or a strong safety. It was a defensive back coming. Well, defensive backs don't normally rush. One time I remember it was a corner coming, maybe more than once. But certainly they decided we're going to have a hard time fighting through blockers. Here's a solution. Let's try to run the guy down from the split side of the formation, from the short side of the formation. And they had contact any number of times in our backfield, as you mentioned. We should have taken steps to take care of that. That's why you have to be careful if you're going to go with a heavy formation. Even if you have a guard, tackle, and a tight end on the short side of the formation, well, there's nobody out wide. So is it hard to imagine that there's a guy over the tight end and a DB standing right outside? And oftentimes they brought him yesterday deciding he didn't need to defend grass. We're going to go ahead and rush him. And he got in our backfield and gave us some problems.
Yeah, that was
big,
that.
Don, real quick, I just want to, we brought up the run game earlier, but how much of the struggles in that first half was Illinois State loading the box and being successful off the edges? How much of that was that versus just not getting a push up front?
Yeah, that was only part of the issue. I think in general they were doing a good job of fighting back in the box. I don't think we opened up a lot of good seams early. There didn't appear to be. Put yourself in number 28 shoes. Hard to find a place to run sometimes. He fought for yardage and had a mediocre average to show for it, 3.6 or whatever it was. But you couldn't say that he did a poor job of advancing the ball. There simply weren't very many good places to go. I honestly think if Cory had more snaps in the second half, when we were getting a better push, we wore him down. And we had a better push. We were controlling the line of scrimmage. Here's a plus for you. I couldn't help but notice, Cory, when you looked at that list, we had one tackle for a loss out of all those run plays for a loss of 1 yard. So at least we were able to fight through that contact with that unblocked defender off the weak side. He didn't get us on the ground, but he did hit us in the backfield, slow us up, maybe give someone else a chance to get to us before we gained the necessary yardage.
And there were at least 2 or 3 times where Cory Moulton I think anybody would acknowledge that's hard to do, Don. Have you ever coached running back? Were you ever
not.
Running backs coach?
No, never have been.
Okay. The reason I ask that is like that is just a challenging thing with the defender hitting you from various points, various spots to maintain your balance and fight through. I just was impressed with Kamari's center of gravity, his balance. And again, he's not a big guy. He's like 5'9", and he bounces. There was at least one play, I think it was in the first quarter, where he just lowered his shoulder and bounced off a guy. And, he seems to be more of a balanced guy than anybody else on the roster. I always said LeSean was maybe the more balanced of the three, but now with Kamari in the mix, he may be as balanced as any of them. Kamari, again, we've compared these guys, but Jazz isn't real patient. He just goes, and he's looking to hit somebody, and that has its place. And he's busted off some plays. He's got decent speed. Caleb's got great speed, but again, not real twitchy. Doesn't really know how to put his foot in the ground. Doesn't seem to embrace contact in spite of his size advantage that he has against most guys. LeSean is more of your balanced guy with good speed, good patience, but I don't know that he's quite got the pop that Kamari Moulton has. And I can see why Kamari is at the top of the depth chart. And for the people in the chat, I saw somebody say earlier, hey, will we see Caleb start week 2? I think Kamari is the starter week 2. I'm not changing things up. If that's what's been proven to me, and I'm Liddell Betts and Tim Lester, and that's what's been proven to me through fall camp, I'm sticking with Kamari Moulton. And I saw some other people mention, apparently it's been out there, and I haven't asked, but apparently it has been publicized. I didn't hear anything from Iowa officially about Jazz Patterson being suspended for the entire game. The reason I asked the question, I didn't see Jazz on the sidelines. If somebody saw Jazz Patterson on the sidelines, I'd be curious to know. So assuming he's back week 2, I want him to get snaps too. I'd like to see all these guys because they all bring something different to the table. JT, anything else?
Yeah, I just had one more question about the tight end motion play. Kind of looked like Canadian football, where that first route they went on the vertical, and then the next 2 times they did a 5-yard comeback. What kind of routes could you build off that to play with Iowa State's eyes? Could we bring in a slant off of it, or what kind of routes would you run off?
Are you talking about when we motion the tight end to become the outside receiver?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. That was it. We did that to start the second half. We had a tight end lined up in a close wing position. He was just off the ball, right outside the tackle. There was a wide receiver that was split off to that side of the formation too. And as you mentioned, we motioned the tight end out wide, and that gave us and in the meantime, the inside receiver, I think most of the time it was number 15, Reese came up and actually put himself in position to maybe rub the corners so that we had a wide open throw to the tight end. And of course, the tight end, once they catch it, it's going to be a little harder to get them on the ground. And it was a productive play. We didn't make a killing with it, of course, but at that point in the game, a 10-yard gain, if we could count on it, seemed to be a pretty big deal. And I think it probably did average 10 or more yards. So it was a nice little wrinkle that they obviously weren't prepared for. Nothing, in the past, we use a reporter like that, of course. But typically we might just line him up out there rather than motion him out there. Lachey can do it. They can all do it. All of the tight ends can do it. And they've all proven that they understand part of the job is to fight for yardage after contact. And they do a good job with that too. I'm proud of all 3 of those guys that are tops on the depth chart.
JT, appreciate the phone call, sir, and we'll be back next Saturday, and hope you're able to be a part of the show then.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir.
JT, one other comment. With that motion, you could put him out there, and you're right. A simple adjustment might be to put him out there with motion and then run him on a slant, because the beauty of slants, of course, if you gain any kind of inside position on a defender, especially if you're a tight end, there's really not much the defender can do. He can't play through you. You're too big. It's hard to run around you. You're too thick. And if the ball's placed into your body, of course, you're going to catch it. You're going to absorb contact. You're going to make good yards. And it's a nice, safe throw.
Folks, I want to take a moment to thank RTI Threads. They've got apparel lines for a couple of guys who looked pretty good yesterday, Aaron Graves, Jacob Gill, and a couple of guys who also got time for really the first time in their careers, not special teams time. Zach Lutmer, Carson Shire. Carson's been dealing with a lot of injuries throughout his career. He is now healthy. Don, I can tell you right now, Seth Wallace is really excited about that young man alongside Jaden Harold next year once you lose Kyler Fisher, once you lose Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson. So look for Carson Shire and Jaden Harrell to really emerge, get those guys' merch now. Zach Lutmer also, dude's upside is ridiculous. He was also a graduate of Central Lyon High School. So both he and Reese Vanderzee, perhaps part of Iowa's future, not only on defense, offense, but also special teams with Zach Lutmer in the punt return game. Aaron Graves looked really good. Check it all out, all the gear, official merch lines for all those players and more over at rtithreads.com. And I want to take a moment to talk about our RTI Threads player of the game, Reese Vanderzee, with 5 catches for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns, not a single drop. And Don, we talked about his length earlier. What caught the first moment that his name got brought up, where my ears kind of perked up, was at Media Day when I asked LeVar Woods. I said, "Hey, who's getting work behind Caden Weege and Caleb Johnson in the return game?" And he brought up Reese Vanderzee. And I'll be frank, when I heard that, I thought, Reese Vanderzee? Because I'm thinking Reese Vanderzee, 6'4", 6'5". You know, he was not a real highly touted kid. Now, granted, he's from a small high school like a Cooper DeJean was, like a Zach Lutmer was, like a Josie Jewell. I mean, there are lots of small town kids that emerge at Iowa. But when I saw him at the high school level, I think he played quarterback his junior year. I didn't look at him and think, wow, he's a guy who's going to play early. I actually thought KJ Parker, his fellow classmate, would have a chance to play earlier than Reese would. And I was dead wrong. He's coming off an injury. He comes into camp. And the fact that he was getting work on special teams made me perk up. And then as camp went on, sounded like he had a really good performance at the closed scrimmage, like second to last weekend of camp. And here he comes in, starts game 1 with Seth Anderson and Caleb Brown out. And Don, you remember me saying this ever since Caleb Brown was declared out due to suspension. I said, hey, somebody's going to have a chance, a young player, to make a statement week 1. And that happened, and it was Reese Vanderzee.
I'm just going to call him RVZ.
RVZ, I like it.
RVZ.
I like it.
I will admit, a couple of comments, Cory. Late in the game, things were getting a little bit boring until one particular play. And we were on defense, and this player got my attention. I remember seeing it and thinking, who is that? And that's unusual when it happens that way. I see a player that I don't know, and I'm thinking, that impressed me. You know the play I'm probably going to talk about. It was Carson Shire. And I thought, wow, I didn't realize he was that fast.
Yes.
He's got really good tools to become a really good linebacker.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm telling you, Seth, you have to read in between the lines when you talk to these coaches about players and development and whatnot. And Seth was not joking when I brought up the guys behind the guys this year. And that's the luxury you have when you get Jay Higgins to come back, when you get Nick Jackson and Kyler Fisher to come back. It's just another year if you can avoid the transfer portal bug. And so far, so good on that note. And now it's the injury bug, right? Keep those guys healthy throughout the season. They're going to play. Jaden Harrell played a little bit on the goal line even last year. Those guys are going to play when needed and when necessary. And Don, is it weird to think of scenarios where Higgins, Nick Jack come off the field and are replaced by younger linebackers just to give those guys breathers?
Well, it's conceivable. Let's just say there's a really tough matchup with an inside receiver versus Jay. Jay's a big, strong guy like he has to be able to survive in the box and play so well in the box. And he's got a good all-around game, of course. He's a good pass defender also. But let's imagine on a hot day, maybe next weekend, he's really gassed. We're having a hard time getting Iowa State off the field. Is it hard to imagine on 3rd and long? And I don't know for sure that Carson has this kind of skill, but I suspect he does. He's certainly got outstanding quickness and athleticism. Is it hard to imagine he might not be a good alternative on 3rd and long to give a linebacker a little bit of a break? I wouldn't be shocked if maybe not next weekend, but sometime over the next few weeks, that became part of our plan, because that young man certainly appears to have way above average ability to play linebacker. Maybe he's not quite ready to handle all the muscle that comes at you from a running game standpoint, but he certainly has the wheels to be able to defend pass, because he's got unusual quickness and unusual speed for a linebacker.
You got some good young Western Iowa kids, guys like Carson Shire, Reese Vanderzee, Zach Lutmer. Aaron Graves is kind of Western Iowa, Dayton, Gowrie, North Central, Western, whatever. I love the small town kids, Don. If you haven't noticed, and again,
incidentally, Aaron Graves, a good game for Aaron. I was happy for him. He flashed back on two guys, and you got to be an old football fan to remember the first one. We inherited a guy named John Hardy, and he was from Sioux City, Iowa. He was on our first team, and he was on a mediocre football team, of course, before we arrived, and we didn't win. We didn't have a winning season our first year either. But John Hardy, as most of you know, went on to play for the San Francisco 49ers. He was a good NFL player, and then more recently, I'd have to say that Graves reminds me of a guy by the name of Mark Bortz, because Mark Bortz is one of the toughest human beings I've ever known. And this says it all. He was an all Big Ten defensive lineman, and yet the Bears were so good at that point, they didn't really know that he could make the team as a defensive lineman. And Hayden suggested, why don't you go ahead and draft Mark Bortz and give him a chance to be an offensive lineman, because I guarantee you he can do it. He started for the Bears in the Super Bowl. He played for, 10 years or something as an offensive lineman in the NFL. But Mark Bortz was a terror on defense, too, as a college player. And I don't doubt that he could have played for all kinds of NFL teams as a D lineman, too. But the Bears had the vision to take him on. And, of course, if they had an injury at D-line, he'd have been playing D-line as a rookie. But if they were healthy, of course, they had the luxury of helping him to transition to be an offensive lineman in the NFL, and one of the very best. I don't doubt that he made the Pro Bowl a time or two. I can't recall, but I know he played well for the world champion Bears. I do know that.
The future of Iowa football, guys like Carson Shire, Zach Lutmer, Jacob Gill. Check out all the apparel over at rtithreads.com. RTI Threads, proud sponsors of Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. All right, we have got a couple of comments here in the chat, and then we're going to go back to our call line. First of all, Dean in the chat says, hi, Don. Had a nice chat with you before the game at the old rec center. So Dean chiming in here, Don.
I'm glad you're listening all over again, Dean. We appreciate it.
James says they stack the box like crazy. How much is that true, Don? I know in the past you've said when people claim that, well, you're running against a stacked box, you sometimes will go back on the record and say, well, you're wrong. They weren't as stacked as you were making it out to be. How much did Illinois State stack the box yesterday?
Well, that wasn't really the main problem with us versus Illinois State. We didn't see all kinds of 8 and 9 man fronts. We didn't. They simply, here's a radical thought, maybe they actually are pretty good in their front seven as long as they can stay fresh. I think it's obvious our depth is better than theirs. I texted Brock last night after the game, and I said, I'm sorry about the outcome of the game, Brock, but you're going to do just fine in the Missouri Valley because you're not going to have the depth issues that you had versus Iowa. I'm not saying they're going to win the Missouri Valley. I doubt that they will. But let's not forget, North Dakota State and South Dakota State in particular, I'm assuming that Oklahoma State went on to beat, I know they did, they went on to beat South Dakota State, right?
Yeah.
But it certainly wasn't a blowout, far from it.
It was a blowout, Don.
I thought it was just 2 touchdowns or something.
Well,
was it more?
Well, first of all, 2 touchdowns. That's pretty lopsided. Let me pull it up here. You don't consider 2 touchdowns to be a blowout?
Well, last time I checked, Oklahoma State is a team that right now I think it's preseason 17th, maybe.
Oklahoma State won by 24 yesterday.
Okay. Well, maybe South Dakota State's not as good as they have been. I don't know what they might have lost. But the point is, year in and year out, and of course, you're very well aware that North Dakota State gave Colorado fits. Maybe Colorado's not that good. We don't know, but it didn't surprise me that North Dakota State looked so good in competing with Coach Prime's team. Coach Prime, incidentally, if he didn't understand game management. He's going to fool around and lose to somebody that he has no business losing to.
Yeah.
Should have run the ball, and they wouldn't have had that last chance to beat him.
Bradley in the chat says, well, they were just trying to get Cade more reps, being that he missed the spring. Yeah, that's not.
I got news for Bradley. How many snaps do you think he's taken over the month of August? There have been a lot of snaps.
Yeah, that's not why he never came out of the game. That's not why Brendan didn't enter the game. And that's not how it works at any other position. If a guy is hurt and is out, that's like if somebody passes him or evens it up, like that is what it is. You're not. Yeah, that's not how it works. Anyways, let's go back to our chat. And John wants to know, Coach, we've heard Tim Lester allude to it a few times, but what makes that quick halfback pitch so important in what he's trying to run?
Let me make a comment about that. I went back and, of course, I looked at the TV version, and I didn't realize the 64-yard run. It actually looked like a toss play. It looked like, let me explain to people. There's two different plays that we used to run. I'm not so sure that I was not going to run both of them too. We have what we used to call 41 and 49 run. That's the old student body right, student body left. Back in the days of O.J. Simpson, you toss in the ball and here you go, with a wide sweep. But then we also had another play that was very effective for it. We had 41-49 run. We also had 42 scoop pitch, 48 scoop pitch, and that 64-yard touchdown looked an awful lot like 48 scoop pitch. By that I mean this: it looked like toss left, and yet it appeared that the number two,
Caleb.
Then Caleb presented it like it was a wide running play, but I don't think he was planning at all to go out there because it ended up being off tackle. And I think our lineman knew it's going to look like toss left, but we're going to run off tackle. And he had a nice big seam, and he ran through it, and it was all over but the celebration. So my point is, I think we had both plays. It certainly appeared that we ran two different plays. One was a wide toss. The other looked like a wide toss, but was designed to hit up inside. I don't know that. I haven't talked to the coaches, but I would not be surprised that they actually have both those plays in the running game.
We've got a caller on our call line. We've got Doug. We've got Cory all waiting on hold. Going to take a 30-second break. We'll be back with more. You're watching Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Do you ever ask yourself, how would my life be different if I had made different choices? Would I be happier? More wealthy? Here's a humorous novel that explores that question, venturing back to that magical time in the early 90s when grunge was taking over big hair bands. It was just when our hero, Amy Gare, began to face the real world. You Hawkeye fans just might enjoy the setting as well. Goodbye Def Leppard, I'll Miss Those Jeans by Steph Kramer can be found on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and it's free for Kindle Unlimited subscribers. Nothing better than Hawkeye fans supporting Hawkeye shows. Steph Kramer, and she is sponsoring the show and advertising throughout the season. We appreciate her support. Definitely check it out. I'm in the middle of reading that novel. Goodbye, Def Leppard. I'll Miss Those Jeans. So definitely check it out for free for Amazon Unlimited subscribers. Let's go to our next caller. We've got Doug waiting on hold. Doug, welcome.
Yeah, how you guys doing?
Hi, Doug.
Doug, how are you?
Well, Reese Vander Z made me feel old yesterday. I went to Mount Mercy with his mom. His mom, Meredith, was all-conference in volleyball, all-American in basketball, and a national qualifier in track in the decathlon at NAIA school. I know you knock us NAIA athletes, Cory, sometimes, or just your friend, but she was one heck of an athlete, and I wasn't that good of an athlete, but I ran cross-country there for a year. Yeah, he was awesome yesterday, and I was glad to see that. And I was thinking of 09 with the quarterback. Yeah, they should have gotten Sullivan some snaps, because I remember when Ricky Stanzi went out. You remember that, Cory, in the Northwestern game? And the backup was at Vandenberg. He was not prepared, and we lost that game, and that might have cost us a Rose Bowl. And yeah, you need to get your backup some snaps in a 33-0 blowout. And yeah, But the last thing I was just going to make a comment to Coach that I wanted to thank you. Growing up, I went 15 years. I went all the way through elementary school and middle school without ever losing to the Cyclones. And I grew up here in Central Iowa. You made my childhood a lot easier. I know you remember that last game. I was a freshman in high school, and those 5 McCarney losses hurt. Actually, I was going to give you a story about Bobby Elliott. He was the defensive coordinator when you were there, right? And
All the time, yes.
yeah. Anyway, in 2001, I was working at the North Grand Walmart in Ames, and he was the defensive back coach at Iowa State. And he came in there with a Cyclone shirt on, and this is after they beat us. And he goes, "How's your day?" And I go, "Well, I'm a Hawkeye, and it wasn't a very good day because they beat us in 2001. That was a Senkus junior, Common Can senior year. You were probably at Western at the time, but Bobby Elliott says to me, "Well, we used to be Hawkeyes." I was like, I wanted to yell at him, "You traitor, you went to the wrong side." But I know coaches go where the jobs are. But he was a really good defensive back coach and a really good defensive coordinator. Rest in peace. But just big week. I hate losing to the Cyclones. Living here in Central Iowa, it hurts a lot. Like I said, I was very happy to see what Reese did yesterday. Do you think Reese will get those snaps next week when the other guys come back, or is Brown coming back? I guess that's my question.
I'd be surprised personally if we didn't see a heavy dose of Reese next weekend. Absolutely.
Yeah,
All right.
rightfully so. Rightfully so. I mean, what has Caleb Brown proven? I mean, with all due respect to Caleb Brown, I don't know what has he proven. He had problems with drops last year. He has the OWI. Not that you don't forgive a kid, and you're going to give him a chance to climb back into the good graces and back on the depth chart. But frankly, at this point, Reese Vanderzee has proven more. Don, how about this stat? And I know this stat has gone viral here today on social media. Big Ten Network threw this stat up on the screen yesterday, but I took a picture of it myself. In 2023, Iowa had 3 catches for touchdowns by wide receivers. In 2022, they had 2 total catches by wide receivers that ended up in touchdowns. Iowa had 3 wide receiver touchdowns in the second half alone yesterday. I mean, we could just sit here and act like that's just a coincidence. But we've been telling people, Don, for months that Tim Lester was going to get the wide receiver room in a better spot. And I'm not saying John Budmeyer deserves no credit. I'm not implying that. But John Budmeyer, is very new to coaching the position. And he wasn't there Saturday. Not that a lot of work didn't go in. I mean, the work that went into the offseason and through fall camp, certainly that helped what we saw yesterday. But Don, just talk about the wide receiver friendliness of this offense. And is this the fruitage that we're going to see on a regular basis? Maybe not 3 touchdowns per half for wideouts, but we're going to see exponential growth as it relates to wide receiver involvement when you compare it to the last few seasons under Brian, are we not?
I want to give Tim credit. I'll give you a specific back-to-back plays in the game. Early second half, we have 3rd down and 3, and we go empty, and we throw. It appears we're going to throw what we call Y stick. It's a little flat route for the inside receiver just to gain a first down. 5-yard route, right? We've done it earlier in the game, matter of fact. This time, though, it wasn't Y stick. It was Y stick and go. That play resulted, let me get my yardage. Y stick and go to Luke was plus 19 on 3rd and 3 rather than plus 5 with a stick route. And the very next play, it's not the play call so much as the fact that we added tempo to it. Cory, you know what I mean when I say tempo. We're going to snap the ball in a hurry. So we hustled up. We lined up on the 12-yard line or whatever yard line we're on. Obviously, they're a little bit surprised that we're snapping the ball so quickly. We fake left. We roll to the right with naked. And this time, the guy we hit is number 15 on what you would call an over route. He's sprinting across the field to get in Kate's vision. Cade checks the outside, doesn't really feel as good about the outside receiver. Looks inside, finds number 15, makes a good throw. We've got 2 plays. They covered about 40-something yards, and we put up another touchdown. I guess that was our first touchdown in the second half, I think, wasn't it?
Sounds right.
I believe that's right, yeah. That was the first one.
Don, let's go back to our call line. James has been on hold for a long time. James, welcome.
How you doing today?
Doing all right. Thanks for hanging tight and being patient.
Right. No, you're fine. I know you got a lot on your plate, so it's all good. My stream right acts up sometimes, so it will like tweak, and I don't think I'm here because everything like freezes. So that's why I get confused, like if I'm here or not. But first off, Vandersee played quarterback his senior year. He played wide receiver his junior year because Lubmer was quarterback his senior year. And then he played quarterback his senior year.
Okay. Yeah. So that's even more impressive. He was playing quarterback his senior year than for him to come in here and perform through one game, even against an FCS opponent like he did yesterday, is impressive.
And then Weechin got.
Let me just say this about Reese Vandersee, because as I mentioned earlier, he is our player of the game. Don, the other thing that was impressive, not just about Reese, but also all the other receivers. Don, did we see a single drop yesterday?
You can argue that Cory had a drop on the flat.
He's talking receivers, though.
We see a single drop from a wide receiver or a tight end yesterday.
No. Matter of fact, let's go back to Reese's first catch. I don't know if you remembered, it was a play action, what we call a bang route. It's like a slant, except it's a little bit deeper. Matter of fact, it went for how many yards? At least 15, and maybe more like 20. How early was that thrown? I got too many notes here. Play action bang to Reese, plus 18. That's his first catch. The catch, he's open. It was a good throw right on the money by Cade. What impressed me is he caught it. He protected the ball well because he did get hit pretty hard by that free safety. That's the nature of a bang route. Play action takes the linebacker out of the throwing lane, and now if you have the guts to catch it and absorb the hit, it's a nice game. That's precisely what Reese did on that play, and that's his first college catch. That impressed me. That was a well-executed play by both he and our quarterback.
And my point of bringing up drops, Don, it seems like, and I'm exaggerating maybe a little bit, but emphasis on little bit, like it seemed like last year and the year before, every single game we were talking about drops. Every single game. Like we were talking about guys not getting open and the quarterback not putting the ball on the money. It was all those things. We always talked about it was all those things. We did not see drops yesterday. Now, maybe next week we see a bunch of drops. But without what people thought preseason, 2 of their top 3 guys, and I don't think they are 2 of their top 3 guys, but without Caleb Brown, without Seth Anderson, playing a true freshman along with a guy who's never set foot in an Iowa jersey until now, and Jacob Gill, there were no drops. And oh, by the way, Jacob Gill got rocked a couple of times on catches onto the ball. I continue to say I think he's going to be steady Eddie for this team. I think he's their best overall receiver. Here's a quick trivia question for you, James, because I know you love stats. Luke Lachey led all Iowa skill players with 8 targets. Who had the next closest
It was
number?
Reese.
It was Reese. 7.
6 or 7, yeah, 7. I knew it was 6 or 7. I was like,
He was with 7, and then the next closest was Jacob Gill and Addison Estringa, who each had 3. But think about that. Reese Vandersee with over double the next closest receiver. I just think it's, for the people asking what about Caleb Brown coming back, I think Brown's going to play. But that's a heavy dose for a guy who, like, I don't think this is a flash in the pan. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and have 7 targets every game. But for him to have 7 targets in the first game of the season, when you have a healthy Jacob Gill, when you have a bunch of tight ends that you're comfortable throwing the ball to, this is a sign that Tim Lester likes this young guy. And we saw why.
no, yeah, I don't disagree. And that, one more thing before I get to answer questions that you went over, was Weechin got taken out because he was cramping or wasn't feeling well. One or the other. Some people say he was sick. Other people in this thing say he was cramping. But that's one of those reasons was the reason he wasn't returning punts in the second half. That's why Lubmer was. So that's the only reason they went with Lubmer. But
sure. Well, he came back. So
yeah. Whatever happened, whether he was sick or cramping, he was feeling better or whatever. But my first point was Cade, I feel like didn't play as well in the first half because, and he's kind of said that he kind of hinted at this in the press conference, was like, he hasn't played in so long. He hasn't played in like 8 months. So like it kind of was tough for him to like. He had to get that confidence back. Kind of that groove back. He hasn't played in so long, so it's kind of been different. You get different looks than you do in practice. You know what I mean? Like practicing and playing games are two real different things.
What's the problem taking him out and putting in Brendan when you're up?
No,
30?
I'm not saying that. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I feel like he played better in the second half because he got his legs under him. That's what my point was.
Oh, that could be. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what my point was. That he got his legs under him because he was
during the game. I'm like, hey, he's rusty. Like, give him some time. Give him some time. That's why I didn't want to pull. I didn't want to have him pulled in the first half. I was just saying that's why he played better in the second half because he finally got his legs on him. He got more used to seeing what he's seen. He took a couple of hits, so he's like, oh, I can take a couple of hits. I'm not gonna get hurt taking a couple of hits, and he's kind of okay, maybe I'm back to being myself again. That's how I kind of looked at it first and second half. But I do agree when it was 33-0. I felt like he should have been out the game. I was at the game and I was kind of like, why is he still in the game when it's 33-0? Like, it's just in case something does go wrong, you kind of need him in there. Let me just say this, and Don, you don't need to comment, but I think that's Kirk.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. 100%, you're not wrong. But
I don't believe that's Tim. I don't believe that's Seth Wallace. I think that's Kirk.
Yeah,
that's my hunch. Listen. There's nobody telling me that. I'm just my hunch is.
You're thinking
because
Kirk phoned up from home to alert Tim. No, do not put him in.
You and I both know that was discussed in advance, Don.
Probably, yeah.
I'm not saying. I mean, who knows the nature of those discussions? Like, did Kirk say, "Hey, don't put Brendan up until we're up 40"? I don't think he would have said that, but up 33-0, you're not going to put him in. That seems odd to me. That just seems bizarre.
Yeah. Well, at halftime, I simply believe, like a lot of Iowa fans, Cade's still getting the rust off. He's played better in the second quarter than he did the first quarter. Didn't surprise me that he played better still in the third quarter. So we passed up a great opportunity to also get some rust off of Brendan Sullivan. Say it that way.
I agree.
Yeah, definitely. And the wide receiver core was not. I mean, obviously you didn't have a lot of guys, but they played well for what you expected. Tight end played well. Running backs, like to me, I get why you say Kamari's the best, but I also feel like Caleb not being there in the first half was kind of why we couldn't get nothing. Because I feel like Caleb brings a lot more different stuff than Kamari and LaShawn does. He's more that physical guy.
I'm just curious, what does he bring that's so different besides like speed once he gets to the open field?
I feel like he runs harder than he's bigger, so he runs harder than the other guys. Is how I feel.
Harder? You think he runs?
Well, he's
harder?
bigger. So he's a bigger body too, though. So that's kind of the thing. Like
I think he runs less hard than the other three guys.
I wonder what the stats are yards after contact.
I can tell you right now. Yards after.
I mean, he didn't have much contact on the big one. He didn't. He had broke off like one tackle maybe. So I don't know if that counts as his yards as contact. Because there wasn't really contact. The dude barely tackled him. Or didn't barely touched him. I mean, but
is yards after contact on a box score, Don?
Maybe not. Maybe it's strictly in passing game.
It is. Yeah.
Well, I just have great faith in Liddell Betts. Liddell Betts will play the best guy the most.
I agree.
No, yeah. But I feel like we're in a good spot with having, 3 or 4 different guys that we can kind of go to. Like, you have the 4 different options, and maybe they all bring something different, so you kind of have that where you can kind of ride the hot hand on a given day, if that makes sense.
Running back by committee is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a real luxury to never have to worry about playing a tired running back. We're going to be in that spot, hopefully all season.
Yep, definitely. And one thing I don't think we give enough credit for is how well the defense played. They gave up 0 points, and I get people are going to say it's an FCS team. People are going to say that, but still giving up 0 points to a team like that is still something impressive. And I know their best running back, one of the best running backs in MVC, got hurt. Like what in the first drive? Was it first or second drive? Whatever it was.
First 3 minutes of the game.
Yeah. But
their 2 overall best players got hurt in this game, Mason King and then their linebacker.
Yeah, but I know that kind of part of it. That's probably part of why their offense wasn't as efficient, because Mason King wasn't there, and he's one of the kind of bell horses to kind of lean on. But still, giving up 0 points is always a benefit, no matter who it is. And I think it gives you confidence. One more thing before I get off, I don't know if you caught this, Cory. Caleb Bacon did get hurt last week, and it sounds like he's not going to be healthy for next week. Is what it sounds like. So that's kind of the leader of the Iowa State defense. So I'm kind of wondering how it's going to figure out, because I know Iowa State only won 21-7 was it to North Dakota?
You know what? Yes, and you know what? You know what that tells me, and I could be totally off on this, Don. We're going to get to Iowa State here before 9:00, but I wonder about Iowa's ability. So I've been talking about Iowa State's secondary all off season and why that group makes me nervous, because they got 4 guys who are really experienced, like Iowa's. Well, 3 of Iowa's 4 guys And I just wonder now with the Caleb Bacon injury, perhaps that opens more things up over the top, because perhaps Iowa State's going to have to rely on stacking more in the box than leaving your linebackers to do more work against the Iowa run game. I don't know. We'll get to that, Don, but that's a good point, James. I did hear about the Caleb Bacon injury.
Yep. And one more thing I want to kind of point on the defensive side of the ball is the one position I think that was the most question mark was that other corner spot, and I feel like TJ stepped in there admirably, played really well. I feel like, and obviously, like I said, it's an FCS team, but I still feel like he played admirably well. And I feel like it gave me a little bit more confidence. Obviously, he's going to face a lot more tougher receivers, than that, especially next week with like Jaden Higgins, Jalen Oil, those are a lot tougher receivers, but it still gave me confidence that like he was in the right spots on most of the times. He was in the right position on most of those stuff, especially in the zones and all that stuff as well.
I was proud of TJ because I certainly noticed it was pretty obvious early in the game they were going to go after TJ. They had any number of throws his direction. I don't know if they've completed one of them yet. There were times when TJ was helped by underneath coverage. I think all of our linebackers broke up a pass one time or another during the game. First, it was Nick Jackson. That was a ball thrown underneath TJ.
Really good play, really good timing. We saw Kyler Fisher make a really good play in coverage, Don. I was going to make a comment. Can I just say this? I was going to make a comment to you.
Okay.
Not one play makes or breaks a guy, but you said in our preseason show you weren't sure if Kyler was one of their best 11 guys, and he may not be, Don. That was a heck of a play he made in coverage in that first half.
It was, and my point was we have an awfully good, well, let's say it this way, Kyler can't play all 11 positions. So for him to be one of the best 11 players means he has to be better than somebody at linebacker or another somebody at linebacker, or maybe be better than somebody like Castro. Good luck with that. Castro's an exceptional player too. So we simply don't have many spots that are open, so to speak, in our starting lineup. They're pretty well claimed by players that have proven a lot already over their careers, and they're determined to prove a lot more even this year. Last year was nice. Their goal is to be better than last year, I promise you.
James, I want to let you slide. Thank you for being so patient.
One more thing before I get off. I heard you say North Dakota State, and I heard you say South Dakota State. I'm kind of disrespected that you didn't say UNI and that. I had to put my love on my hometown team, for the MVC. But that's just me being biased, for MVC. But
I'll be rooting for Nebraska plenty against UNI plenty against Nebraska. So don't worry.
No problem. But good. Have a good night, and hopefully we get the one next week. That's obviously a big one. We want that momentum going into that, and I think, like you said, it kind of plays in our chances down the road. If we can win that game, it definitely helps our chances down the road. So
thank you, sir. All right. We've got a special treat here for our next segment here from the Hawkeye of the Storm, our Iowa postgame with Coach Don Patterson, good friend of ours here at the show, Elliot Clough from Hawkeye Beacon. I had to pause there, Elliot. I'm not used to the Hawkeye Beacon thing yet. So
yeah, I've told you I'm quite happy with this new name. I'll tell you that. We can just leave it at that.
I bet you are. And Elliot, I know you're enjoying some wholesome family time this evening. So I do appreciate you jumping on. The reason I invited you on here, for people that didn't know, and I know it was mentioned in our chat earlier. First of all, Elliot, if you haven't met Coach Patterson, Don, Elliot.
I haven't. Nice to meet you, Don.
My pleasure.
I want to make sure we address the recruiting news that broke today, and that's regarding 4-star receiver Terrence Smith, who has committed to the Hawkeyes. Don, you know a little something about wide receivers with the first name Terrence. Speaking of TJ Hall's dad, who played for you. But Elliot, I didn't expect this today, and now I'm not into the recruiting sphere like you are, of course. We've been waiting on word from Terrence for a while. The more you wait after his official visit, back in June, the more you think, maybe he's going to Minnesota. Did this surprise you? And when did you start to feel intel that this might be coming down on this Sunday?
Well, to tell you the truth, I had my article about a commitment pre-written right after his official visit because of how well it went. He did tell me that it kind of surprised him how well it went. By the sounds of it, he was really leaning Minnesota for a while. And those were the two schools that were really in on him. Of course, he had the offers from Iowa State. He had the offer from Purdue. Purdue backed off. I got that commitment from LeBron Hill, who's another high-level receiver. Couldn't tell you where he's from, but Iowa didn't go after him. That's why. But Iowa State wanted him for a little while. They backed off. A lot of MAC offers. But when you watch the film, I mean, we had him at a high 3-star. So 5.7 rating is what we have him as on Rivals, which is just short of a 4-star. You could make the argument, of course, I think another site has him as a 4-star as well. I label him as a fringe 4-star because he's right there for us. But this is something that I really thought he was leaning Minnesota until this last week. And in July, he had told a couple other folks that he had planned to commit soon. And to me, that was telling that he was going to pick Minnesota, because after his official, he said, I want to see the offense in action first before I make a decision, which fine. He's going to be visiting next week, September 7th. And he actually, from what I know, this was a decision that was made within the last week or two. But by the sounds of it, to me, that meant he was going to commit after September 7th, officially announced. But I think, honestly, based on, just reading the tea leaves, this play by Reese Vanderzee this last week was, oh, okay. I'm good with this decision. And so it came out today.
Timing, not to interrupt you, Elliot, but I did feel the timing was curious. I mean, especially given a wide receiver, and Don, just to bring you into this for a second, how many times have we talked about wide receiver play needing to be better before Iowa was really going to be able to compete with the big boys? And as Elliot said, Rivals 247, they both have him as a 3. On 3's got him as a 4. But Rivals has got him, looking here, they've got him as a top 100 player at his position. Iowa has struggled to get kids even at this level at wide receiver. This is a win, and I haven't been able to look at his tape. He's obviously got good size. But the other thing I would say, Elliot, is one thing I like to do, and this may have no validity at all, but I sometimes look at these other these other offer lists and say, okay, who are they up against as it relates to positional history? Minnesota's a team that's produced really good receivers that have gone to the next level with PJ Fleck. Purdue has done the same thing, although Purdue did it mostly under Jeff Brom, totally different circumstances there. And I believe Iowa State was an offer, right? Of his few Power 5 offers, those were 3 of the 4. All those programs, with the exception being Iowa, have produced NFL-talented receivers, with the exception being Purdue, I guess, with the new coaching staff. Just, Don, your thoughts on getting this commitment one day after a pretty solid performance from Iowa's wideouts?
Well, I was wondering, did his decision change, or maybe did it cement it that we played as well as we did yesterday, and he saw productivity out of the receivers? I wonder if that had anything to do with it.
Yeah. Elliot, did you get any, I don't know if you've talked to Terrence, did you get any feel from this post-commitment? Have you chatted at all with him?
So I haven't been able to talk with him at all yet. Hoping to do that either, tomorrow or soon. But that's my read of it too. Like I said, I really just think, especially you look at the similarities between him and Reese Vanderzee in terms of the type of receiver they are. Both true X receivers, both 6'4", 190-ish in their senior years of high school ball. That's the model is there for a guy like Terrence Smith to say, okay, this makes sense. And to have guys that are both those size, both guys that can go up and get it, that can make some. I mean, I posted the first 3. I don't know if you saw this, Cory, but I posted the 3 first highlights from his huddle on Twitter today. The first one is a go up and snag it with his left or with his right hand, one-handed catch. The next 2 are touchdowns. One's a go up and get it ball. The other one he found the hole in the zone and took it for 70 yards. It's so like I said, the framework is there with which to work with a guy like Terrence Smith. I like this a lot. This is a big win in my opinion, not only in terms of talent, getting him on campus at Iowa, but to keep him away from a Big Ten rival in Minnesota. Right. And the other thing, so I'll just add this quick. I think one key factor in his decision, and again, that he hasn't told me this is just, again, reading the tea leaves, is Minnesota already has 3 wide receiver commits. Iowa doesn't have a single one, or didn't have a single one. And so the path to playing time is quicker there with Iowa. And, I'm not saying he's afraid of competition, but that's something that you recognize when you do make your decision. How many other players are on the roster that are on my same position?
How many scholarships does Iowa have to hand out in 25 to receivers?
As in,
just
how many do they possess, or how many do they want to give out?
Yeah, well, I mean, how
Well,
many?
both.
Theoretically, exactly. I mean, I'm just thinking like it's a young group of guys. There's
Yeah. So
who's-
that's a really good question. What I'll tell you what I know right now is they've locked up who they had initially planned to bring in when 85 scholarships was still the number. They're going to keep going a little bit more from what I know, given that the scholarships are up to 105 now. To me, that's an indication that I was going to dip into the portal a little bit more as opposed to bring in massive recruiting classes. They've already got 15 in this class. This class was going to be a little bit smaller than the year prior. They've got who they want, or who they initially wanted. They are going to go after, I think it's his first name is Landon Pace, younger brother, son of Orlando Pace, former right offensive tackle in the league. They're looking at him as a defensive lineman. So they're not done. Probably going to be one or two, maybe even more official visits in the season too. So this class isn't over with. I think the majority of their focus is on the 2026, but they're not writing off the rest of the 2025 class. There are going to be some guys that they go after still.
and just for people aware of why I do think this is significant, not just because of the 4-star number that On3 has them at. I think of the pecking order, I guess, or the in recent classes, Elliot, it seems like Iowa has to work their way down, like who they evaluate at receiver. You know, they don't get this guy, don't get this guy. All right, just next. Terrence Smith is not as low on that list as we've seen. Is that a layman's way of putting this?
No, I think you put that well. At the same time, so what John Budmeyer did this spring, and I include this in a premium article too. You know, they missed out on Zay Robinson. I don't know if you're familiar with in-state recruiting as much. Went to Iowa State. You know, they missed out on Braylon Collier, who was set to take an official visit. They missed out on Davion Chandler, who's now committed to Indiana, home state kid. So they had their misses, but this is a kid that they offered in February before Budmeyer went out on his tangent of offers in the spring, went out to Chicago, went out to Indianapolis. Seth Wallace actually offered him after an in-school visit, and he ended up coming up on a visit that following weekend for junior day. So this is a kid that was on Iowa's radar and that they wanted before Coach Bud even took over. And so obviously Bud made a good impression. I know you and I had a conversation, I think it was on Mark's podcast, about Budmeyer being notably a good recruiter. And to what I've been told by some folks behind the scenes is he's just been a breath of fresh air in terms of his approach, and that it's different than, the previous wide receivers coach. And, I've referred to Tim Lester as a breath of fresh air, especially compared to, again, the previous OC. I mean, you've been at pressers with Tim, right?
Yeah.
It's just a completely different dynamic. Like,
yeah,
it's yeah, we'll leave it there. But from what I've been told, it's like that with Coach Bud as well. So,
yeah, I mean, I had a great conversation with Coach Budmeyer, and I nothing against Kelton Copeland. I never had any. Some guys are more natural recruiters and connect with young people. I mean, that's just right, Don.
At the same time, Kelton landed 2 4-stars 4 classes ago, right? Just couldn't get him to stick around.
Yeah, and we know the room's had problems with drops, and
right.
That's the one thing I brought up earlier, Elliot. I don't know if you were in the queue waiting, but this is a room that had no drops yesterday. Knock on wood, 1 game in, but that's positive. Whether you want to credit Lester, credit Budmeyer. Obviously, they've got different players and true freshman Vanderzee and transfer Jacob Gill, but that helps. And I think you're right on yesterday, and whether that's a good way of making a decision, basing it on, I don't know if it was like, hey, I'm really close to wanting to play, but I need a little bit more. And okay, I see what they did week 1. Now I'm going to pull the trigger, whatever. Got to hold on to them. We got several months until signing day. And, skilled position guys have decommitted in the past. Elliot, I know you got to get going. Anything from the game that I know you heard us chattering with a caller here a few minutes ago, but anything you want to throw into the mix?
Well, you mentioned no drops, no sacks. We talked about this last year, and I will admittedly say I was wrong when I think my first year on the beat was showing in that the way Cade played in those first 4 games, I remember you saying, I think he's hurt. He's hurt. And I was like, well, he's not saying that, but you were right. I will give you that. Because the way he played yesterday and the way he moved, like he was getting sacked 3 or 4 times last year had he played the way he was.
You remember him hobbling
Penn State
for like hobbled for like 15, 20 yards. But
yeah,
I've never seen somebody. Now, Deacon Hill, we won't go there.
I found myself wondering how many times would Deacon have been sacked yesterday.
Did you see Deacon run for that 20-yard touchdown yesterday for Utah Tech?
No, and I prefer not to.
They lost 30.
They probably had to burn one of their timeouts to get him in the end zone.
That's way too soon, Don. Elliot, HawkeyeBeacon.com, right? HawkeyeBeacon.com. Am I saying that right?
Iowa.rivals.com, Hawkeye Beacon, whatever you want to call us. But to finish my point there before I get out of here, no sacks, 4 of 5 on third down in the second half. Only 5 third downs in the second half, which is positive. I've been trying to, I'm going through the film from yesterday and tracking 11 versus 12 personnel, shotgun versus under center, motion versus no motion pre-snap. I think Lester said at media day that Iowa had 6% of their plays had pre-snap motion last season. And I'm only through the first 2.5 quarters, and 53% of their snaps in the first half had pre-snap motion. So things are different. Those are a couple things I noticed. And I mean, I think the glaring takeaway is, man, having a quarterback who can complete some passes really opens things up, huh? I mean, like having 8-9 guys, like folks were trying to blame the offensive line in the first half yesterday, and there are 8-9 guys in the box. You got five hats. How is that going to matter? You can't put a hat on a hat when there's 8 or 9 guys in the box. You just can't do it.
Go back and look at the video.
Yeah, I was going to say
the box wasn't that heavy.
Such a sweet spot with Don here, because
with all due respect, Elliot, the box was not that heavy.
Okay.
We weren't doing a great job of blocking the front 7, and they were giving edge pressure that bothered us a lot too.
Yeah, sure. This was brought up earlier, and this is a sensitive subject with Don. This goes all the way back to a year ago.
Okay.
People talking about stacked boxes. I will say this, Elliot, and I agree with you on this. Having a quarterback that can run, having a quarterback that's healthy, that can move and in and outside of the pocket. I mean, Cade's ability to move the pocket is something I didn't know we'd see from him. And I thought maybe they had to go with Brendan in order to get that mobility. They were able to get it with Cade. And then in addition, guys were open more yesterday than we've seen in previous season openers. Guys were just open more. And whether that be Jacob Gill, Reese Vanderzee, that is, again, not to say I'm going to give credit to this guy or this guy, but that is something that was a big problem. You don't become dead last in total offense over the course of 2 to 3 years without having issues across the board. Wide receiver separation, quarterback play, all of that. Those things were improved in game 1. So,
Don, did you like the offensive play yesterday with, mentioning the stacked versus not stacked box? Did you think the offensive line was
first half, but we unveiled a few more plays in the second half. Cory's heard me say before, have a lot of offense available for any given game doesn't mean you have to use it all. I think that's exactly what happened. We had a limited number of calls in the first half. They didn't produce. We pulled out some plays that were not running the first half that did have success in the second half. And that's exactly what you should do. If you need to use more offense, use it. And I think Tim decided at halftime, we're going to run our counter. There was no our counter in the first half. We're going to run wide motion and throw the ball to the tight end as an outside receiver. Didn't see that in the first half either, but you saw it the very first series of the second half. So there was some offense that we did not run in the first half that very clearly was made available for the second half. I think that helped us.
Okay. And I'll admittedly say I'm still learning football, cross-country runner right here. So,
hey, you know what? No. Listen, let me just say this. There were times yesterday where I'm like, it looks like there's a lot of guys in the box.
Right.
So my challenge to you, Don, is to give us a stat next week about what percentage of plays Iowa's offense runs with a stacked box. Because what do you consider a stacked box to be, Don?
Well, we always talk about 8-man fronts. Let's say it this way. Is there any way you can play zone coverage and stack the box? The answer is no. There really isn't. Now you might play your safeties down low. You know, maybe a 4-cross look in the back end. The safeties are low. Maybe it is quarters coverage, but that's a delicate issue because if they see run, the safeties far on the box, they insert themselves into the box. But what if it's a really good play action pass? Now you're really exposed with play action post. So that's the challenge of playing that kind of look. Typically, if you stack the box, it means you're playing man coverage. You know, man or man free. If you're playing man free, think about it this way. You've got how many receivers are on the field at one time? There are 5, right? Man free means you're manned up on 5 receivers and you have a free safety that's the last line of defense. So 6 from 11, of course, means you're rushing 5. You're bringing an extra guy. Standard rush, of course, is a 4-man rush. That's thought of as a standard rush, right? Because you can rush 4 and defend with 7. That's what most people do most of the time. But if you want to heat up the quarterback a little bit, bring an extra guy, and now you can play man free and be sound, or you can just give up a zone. Most people don't feel very comfortable just giving up zones. And then if you really want to go out, of course, you're going to cover 0. Now you got 5 guys manned up and you're bringing 6, right? And then if you want to be really creative, bring 4 from a side. You're bringing 6, but you're not bringing them 3 and 3. People can block 3 and 3. They can't block a 4th rusher, typically. That's where you get into advanced football, is bringing 4 when you can only block 3. That's a problem.
Real quick, I just want to read this comment before I let Elliot slide. When the OC is in the booth, they can see when the wide receiver gets open. Much harder to see separation when former OC is on the sidelines. Just seeing Tim up on the sideline, and I'm watching on television. I'm not there in the press box, Elliot, but the Big Ten Network shows Tim up in the box. That just makes me, as the inner fan that I am, that just makes me feel better. Just seeing him up there just makes me feel better.
It's like, we actually have an offensive coordinator now. Like, you know,
another thing that'll make you feel better. How many offensive coordinators in the NFL do you think are on the sideline? I promise you there aren't many. They're upstairs where they can see.
Yeah. Well, that's hopefully that Brian learns from that, because I do think that was part of his issues. Elliot Clough of Hawkeye Beacon, Iowa.rivals.com. Follow him at Elliot Clough. And Elliot, we always appreciate the time, sir, and your intel on recruiting. We'll chat with you again, probably over on Mark's channel at some point here soon.
Sounds good, Cory. Appreciate you. Got to give a shout out. One more thing I saw in the chat that just got put up. Brian Allen was awesome yesterday. Brian Allen was awesome. And that's something that I'd heard behind the scenes a little bit too. He's really matured, really, really bought in. Somebody asked during media day, who's going to be that next feared pass rusher? Might be Brian Allen.
Thanks, Elliot. Appreciate it, sir.
Yeah.
No, I agree with him. Brian Allen was good and brought him in on third down plays and took Aaron off the field and brought in some different looks. And I think they're 7 deep right there right now, at least based on what we saw, not to read too far into one game, Don. But we talked about 6 guys. Could they get to 7? Could they get to 8? I like Brian Allen as number 7. Jeff Bowie's been hurt, unfortunately, again. And then Luke Gaffney got some time late. Maybe somebody else will emerge. I think they've got 7 guys they can run, and that's enough. That's enough. Injuries aside, that's enough, I think, to
Well, a good point relating to what you said. I think most people would say if we have 6, 4 of them, in theory, are outside rushers, and only 2 of them are inside players. But when you get into passing situations, what's wrong with taking out those big guys that play on first down inside and putting in 4 defensive ends that are across your entire front? Now you got really active rushers sitting inside and outside.
Absolutely.
And in that regard, our 2 starting defensive tackles, even if they don't have a true valued backup, maybe we can simply give them a little bit of rest on passing situations and put in our 2 backup defensive ends and have all 4 defensive ends out there at once. That's not a bad plan.
Let's go back to our Iowa Smokehouse call-in line. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Tom Patterson. Who's on the line?
Hi, yes, this is Brian.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for being so patient on hold. I know you've been on for a while.
Yeah, no problem. I understand. No problem. I just got a couple of quick little comments, and and one go on defense. Two players that I thought played a great game, and I think they're future stars. And I know both of you guys will like this because I know you both like these players. Was Brian Allen and TJ Hall. I thought played tremendous in their, TJ for his first, game as a starter, beginning of the season, and Brian, I just think just played excellent. So I think they're down the road future stars for our defense moving forward. So.
Yeah, TJ Hall deserves a shout out. Don, I know you got a special connection to TJ. You're a big reason. He told me that at camp or at media day again that you're a big part of why he's here. People don't know his story and his dad that played for you, but I thought he was really solid. And I don't know why. I'd have to go back and look to see why John Nestor was on the field when he got beat deep. It was pretty good coverage, but it was just a good play made by the receiver. Did we see, was that just a personnel thing there, or was that, did TJ come off the field in favor of John at one point?
No, I think it was late enough in the game where basically Jamari and TJ were pretty much done at that point, I think. I don't know that they played that late in the game. I think,
but
we gave other quarters a chance to get some reps too.
I will say I don't think either of those quarterbacks were ready for Illinois State. And Iowa's defense is going to make you look bad at times. But I do think, obviously Iowa's going to be tested, TJ especially, because they're going to target TJ next week. Iowa State's got the guys with Knoll and Jaden Higgins. They've got the players to test Iowa vertically. I think that's going to be the big storyline. Abu Sama was not that impressive against North Dakota. That run game struggled. And I think they're going to have to throw the ball and target likely TJ's side of the field. So I think that's the biggest storyline on that side of the ball this coming Saturday.
Incidentally, let me talk about this. Jamari's interception. That was a great break on the ball. Incredibly good break on the ball.
Yes, it was.
But here's the rest of the story. Get ready for a double cut next weekend.
I know. I was thinking the same thing. I thought, you know what? All that quarterback had to do, and I know that, the play call was what the play call was. All he had to do was pump and that receiver go, and it was done. Jamari was done. But it was a great break on the ball.
Yeah.
Anything else, caller?
Yeah, and to add to what you guys already talked about with the wide receivers, I think what I saw yesterday, and obviously we had two guys not even there. I think we can say that the wide receiver room as a whole has taken that turn to the going up. With what we saw with those two, Gil in his first game and Reese, then you get Caleb and Seth back, and if we can hopefully add another receiver or two there, plus then we get our commitment today from that receiver. I think the wide receiver room is finally taking that turn to the up, moving forward, moving up. So
absolutely, and
really
let's hope, caller. Let's hope that with the Tim Lester effect, all of these guys will be just better than all of the guys in previous years. Like, they should be able to get more out of everybody on the roster, and not everybody's going to be a starter. But hopefully Jarrett Bowie continues to develop and Seth Anderson gets better. And Caleb Brown is a different player than he was last year. Hopefully all these guys just continue to push one another. And Don, a guy like Reese Vandersee coming in as a true freshman and putting up numbers. Look, these guys are teammates. I'm sure they're friends. But that should give those two guys, especially Caleb, who did that to himself, getting suspended for game one, motivation to come back better, come back stronger, and beat Reese Vandersee or Caden Weegan out for that other wide receiver spot. Hopefully that's iron sharpens iron.
Exactly.
Yep. And one question I didn't notice, I don't know if you guys know the answer. Was there anything with Logan Jones? I don't know if he played or it looks like I didn't see him hardly at all in the second half. It was the Tyler Ellsbury looks like did mostly the center stamping, but I don't know if Logan was even out there or not out there, or
I'm looking at I'm looking at the participation chart now, and it looks like 65 or 64 was out there. Oh no, I'm sorry, 64 is Leighton Jones. Don, was Logan out there?
You mean at all?
Well, I think he was out there, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. I don't know when he came out, but he definitely didn't he start the game? I'm sure he did.
Yeah, they had his name on the graphic. I guess I wasn't paying close enough attention. But let's see here. Participation. I'm looking at the why am I not seeing his name? It's got to be here somewhere. I'm just missing it. But yeah, he was out there, caller. I don't know if how much he played in the second
Yeah,
half.
I thought I saw him out there, but then I go, did he get hurt or wasn't that playing? Since we had trouble moving the ball, they went a different direction. I didn't know. It seemed looked like Tyler played mostly all the second half. So
yeah, I'm gonna find his name here, but yeah, he's 65, isn't he, Don?
Yeah, they never mentioned. We didn't get a lot of information out of the sideline reporter, but I didn't notice. Certainly, the announcers didn't say anything about him being injured at any point in the game.
Caller, I appreciate you being here and for hanging on hold for so long. I know it's I know it's a challenge. So.
No, one quick thing. I'll get off. I don't know if your guys' I know mine was heart was going when that in the first half when we were down. I don't know if we were in the red zone or not or close to it, and Cade threw a pass, and you can clearly see he knocked it off I think it was Connor Colby's helmet, and when it popped up in the air about 20 feet, and oh no.
That happens, Don. Any way to prevent that from happening?
Well, I slowed the TV down to really get a look at that. And that was Kobe's helmet, as I recall.
Yes.
Here's my note.
I did just find Logan Jones on the participation report, so he did play.
Here's the note I made. Ball carries off stationary O-line helmet. Sometimes when you see that happen, when the ball goes off of an offensive lineman's helmet, it's because the lineman moved at the last split second, and then the ball carried off the helmet. In this case, the helmet hardly moved. So I found myself thinking, Cade, you're not that tall. You got to be sure that you are throwing between players because you're hard pressed to throw over them. There are all kinds of quarterbacks that have done great things. Drew Brees is a great example. Drew Brees didn't throw over NFL linemen. He threw between them. So it was a little odd to me that the ball, of course, the lineman wasn't that far in front of Cade, and yet the ball clearly was trying to go through our right tackle, and that didn't work very well. So I don't know why Cade didn't realize as he looked with the ball, we're not even going to be able to clear our own offensive line with this throw. Maybe his eyes were somewhere else, and they only went to that particular spot at the last possible second. I don't know, but it is odd. It's not odd, of course, when a ball goes off of a defensive lineman, because let's face it, he's changing directions. He's trying to get in the throwing lane. The tackle, of course, is just trying to block his guy. If you go back and look at the play, his helmet's hardly moving at all, and yet the ball still carried off the helmet. It was kind of mystifying to me as to why we threw it in the back of his helmet.
Caller, appreciate you being here, sir, and we'll talk to you hopefully next week after the next game.
Thanks for taking my call, and I appreciate it. Yeah, let's go. I'll take a quick quote from Coach McCarney. It's cloning week. We got to get the clones.
There you go. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the call. Good stuff. Absolutely. A clone week, Cyhawk week creeps up on you having been the second week of the season. I'd love for it to be during rivalry week towards the end of the year, but it's not. And it is what it is. It should be interesting. I'm feeling good. We'll talk about that here in just a second. We've got one final break as we head into the home stretch of our show here with Coach Don Patterson. We'll be back after a word from our sponsor. You're watching Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson.
Chasmium believes every young athlete deserves a shot at greatness. By making data analytics accessible and easy, they provide a new way for coaches and athletes to improve their game. Chasmium's digital scoring app, all-in-one stats, and chart software enable teams to quickly and easily find new ways to strategize and harness the power of data. Join Chasmium in revolutionizing the world of youth sports with tools that make a difference. Schedule a software demo or sign up today at chasmium.com. Chasmium, where sports technology sparks victory.
Really excited to talk to Don throughout the season ahead about Chasmium, one of our partners this year, because they are working hard, especially with high school analytics, but changing the game of high school baseball, high school softball, and their software very much groundbreaking in the high school sports stratosphere. So excited to have them as part of the show this year. We're going to go quick fire on some comments and then take our final caller of the day, and that's Cory, who's on hold. So, Don, let's go quick fire on these. First of all, Brian wants to know, do you think actually having a passing attack will force teams to play legit instead of stacking the box every game? I think we addressed that earlier. maybe less stacking the box than people have made it out to be in the past. David brings up Jazz being suspended for reportedly violation of team rules. How about Tim Stevens? Says Drew should have had the 59-yard attempt on 4th and 2. He was ready to set the record, the Kinnick record. All right, Tim. We'll remember that. I'm guessing Drew will get a chance at that at some point.
I'm guessing there might have been just a very slight wind into our face, kicking to the north. I think that I didn't watch pregame, so I don't know what kind of range he had kicking to the north. My guess is even he might have been short from 59.
D. Rollison, thank you for the super chat. Only week 1, but total offense ranks at number 40 in the country, Don. Number 40. That's not bad. That's not bad for one weekend. At least you're starting there. And
yeah, and we're averaging 40 points a game. That's got to be higher than 40, I would think.
Brian says, do you think the bunch formations invited more defenders in the box?
They invited an extra rusher off one side or the other, yes.
Cyhawk C Money says, Coach, what would you have done to stop that unblocked defender from coming into the backfield from that left side all night?
Well, one thing you want to do is if you spread out, it's harder for them to fool you with a guy rushing when you didn't think he was coming. If they have to deploy to defend a formation that involves width, then obviously they can't get all packed in there. Anytime you get in a tight formation, you better be really alert just to be able to read whether or not a guy's coming that you don't expect to come. And a simple example, imagine a flanker formation where you have 2 tight ends, 1 receiver, and now the corner's standing just outside of that tight end. It's not hard at all for them to say, hey, this time, Joe, anytime you get a nub form, what I used to refer to as a nub formation, nobody wider than a guard, tackle, tight end, go ahead and bring him. You know, and I mean, how much damage can you do? There's no receiver out there. There's no receiver for me to work underneath. I think I'll go ahead and rush. So when you get in tight formations, you're inviting extra rushers. And it's hard to know when they're coming because they're lined up not very far from the ball.
Gronkos, if I'm pronouncing that right, Gronkos, whatever. Thank you for reminding everybody. Hit that like button, folks. Hit the thumbs up. It's very simple. Doesn't cost anything. Just hit the thumbs up right now. Got 200 people here. I'm almost 2 hours into the show. And we're going to be wrapping this thing up here about the 2 hour mark. So thank you for reminding everybody. Please hit that like button. Thank you for the super chat, Brian. Do you know why teams don't use stand-up tight ends more? Just leverage?
Good question. I don't know. You know, it worked well for us. It worked well for us because nobody else was doing it, and we had a better idea of how to do it, I think, than anyone else did. So it was effective for us. If you can be a little bit unique in your approach to the game, sometimes you can gain an advantage. I think we did with the stand-up tight end. And I understand there's some things a stand-up tight end cannot do as well. But I simply would say this. I know a lot of high schools in Iowa back in those days were standing up their tight ends. When a coach came to me, I always asked him one question: are you going to throw to your tight end? If you're not going to throw to him, then for God's sakes, don't stand him up. If you want him to be an active part of the offense, absolutely, we can talk about that because it can give you some advantages in terms of run and pass. So it worked for us. I think if somebody tried it now, it would work all over again, frankly, because, again, people don't know how to play against it because they haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's true. Brian, thank you for the super chat. And Seth, good reminder. He says smokehouse sausages are fire. I have got a smokehouse sausage, summer sausage in my fridge. So that reminds me, I want to make a a special plug here to Iowa Smokehouse. Yes, they are a part of our show, our coverage once again this year. Tasting is believing with their sausage, but also their meat sticks, steak bites, ketchups, and barbecue sauces. They got everything you need for a tasty game day. Check it all out at iowasmokehouse.com. Use the code Hawkeyes. That code is active again and tribute to this show and this season. Use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your total order at iowasmokehouse.com. Tasting is believing with Iowa Smokehouse. And get your free quote on auto, renters, homeowners, boaters insurance, everything, life insurance with Brad Van Meter down at State Farm. And you don't have to live in the Des Moines area to benefit from his personalized team and his hardworking team down on Fleur Drive in Des Moines. Give him a call, 515-256-6480. You can also visit him online on the interwebs at www.bradvanmeter.com. That's www.bradvanmeter.com. State Farm had been in business now for over 100 years, and this team, they've been down on Fleur Drive for decades. Give them a call, 515-256-6480 for great rates on insurance. All right, we've got a couple more comments. Pat wants to know, do you think Kirk gave up the leash after the first half? Well, he was not able to have contact with the coaching staff, so the answer to that question is no. Kyle says, my opinion is if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one. See, I disagree with that, but I appreciate him saying my opinion. Unlike Mitch, who states it as a fact, he says you don't kneecap your QB when he is feeling good. Period. Period, Don. You're wrong. I'm telling you, you're wrong, Coach. Period. Maybe I'm exaggerating Mitch's tone when he says this, but it's just a statement. It's not an opinion. It's a statement.
If the score's 33-0, and you put your starting quarterback, I don't think you're kneecapping your quarterback.
I agree. And bringing in Sullivan for a couple of plays in the first half ain't kneecapping your quarterback. All right. James says, what does the wide receiver room look like next week with Brown back and if Seth Anderson is healthy? I think those guys got to be battling probably with Caden Weegan, because to me, you play your best three guys, and Weegan's the only guy. Did Weegan have a catch yesterday, Don?
I don't believe so.
He did not. He didn't even have a target. So, hey, that would tell me if I'm one of those other two guys, okay, there's still a starting spot on the field. But if they're playing more 12 personnel, then you're going to see more two tight ends and two receivers anyways. So,
and I don't think 5 or 15 did anything to take him out of the starting lineup.
Yeah, I agree. And right now, Caden would be number 3. Now, we'll see what happens with Caleb back, because we would perceive him to be a starter when healthy and when available. James wants to know what's the most impressive thing you saw with the offense yesterday to this point.
I guess the fact that I realize we're playing against FCS defenders, the fact that we caught the ball well. You know, you didn't see the drops that we've seen so much in recent years. And some nice catches too. Some difficult catches that guys actually made. Catches in tight windows. And there were some nice balls thrown by Cade too. I thought Cade did a really good job of extending plays. There were several times where he should have been sacked and wasn't, because he's just a little more athletic than Deacon, certainly. Maybe a lot more athletic than Deacon. Came at me and insulted if I said he's only a little more athletic. He's quite a bit more athletic. And that showed up yesterday too. So I'm happy for Cade that he's closer to 100% than he's been in a long time. And I hope he's that way for the rest of the year.
Final caller of the night. And I don't mean to kneecap Cory, our final caller, but, this can't be a real long call, but I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad you were a part of the show yesterday. I turned on the show and I saw your face. So I said, okay, it's officially an Iowa postgame show if Cory's showing up. And that doesn't mean me. That means you.
We missed you. I mean, I love Kyle, but it's not an official show without you. But I and your boycott with KF not being in attendance.
Yes, that's what it was. I was suspended watching it with Mary and Kirk. That's exactly, you got me.
So, so
I thought that was a fair question. Is Cory also suspended for one game?
That's
Was
why
it
I'm
for-
here.
right.
I'm here today. I had to leave the show at midnight on Friday, and I was back this morning at 12:01.
So next question, was it the UI or was it interfering with
I-
recruiting?
Yeah, I reached out to Cade. I reached out to Cade early as well, Don.
Now, the truth be told, the decent side of Cory acknowledged that he fell far short of a 4-hour show, which is the minimum standard here. So
Well, I'm sure we'll have some in the future.
you're going to appreciate this, but my paper plate with all my points I was going to make, I'm tossing that out of respect for time.
Your
But-
paper plate. Wow. Is there a paper shortage? Is there a paper shortage in the world? You're using paper plates now. Okay.
I just used my last 3x5 note card for work last Friday, so I'm in a crisis.
Cory, please tell me at least we answered a few of those questions you had written down on that paper plate.
Yes,
And Cory, if you're short of note cards, I'm sure Brian has a few because that's what he used for his playbook was a note card. I'm sure he's got a few he could give you.
now my brother and I would come after you for going after our boy Brian Ferris, but that's beside Okay, so I'm gonna start World Wide Web War #1. I'm gonna die on a couple hills. First off, I'm in the trenches with Cory on this. Kamari Moulton was absolutely special. That guy ran the hardest yards. He ran those hard yards even better than LaShawn Williams did last year, when I thought LaShawn Williams was by far our strongest runner. I am 100% sold. I don't know how it's possible with his body makeup, but he is the hardest runner on our team for the hard yards. And I think it's a beautiful combo, and I think they used it perfectly. And because I think that I equate Caleb Johnson to someone starting a race car out in second gear. Doesn't have a lot of torque through the hole, but if you can get him smooth through the hole, he's gone because he doesn't need to upshift. He can take it to 100 miles an hour.
You know, as soon as he gets in the open field, he's gone. Like there's not many people that are going to catch him. I mean, that's good. That's great.
And so we're dying together on that hill, Cory. Now I'm going to die on my own hill, and I'm going to up, and I'm going to use. I'm going to steal a phrase. If you follow any searches on YouTube for Caitlin Clark, you've obviously come across Mick Talks Hoops channel, which is out of Ireland, but the guy's he's up to 30,000 subscribers. But anyway, he often says, don't get it twisted. And I'm here to say, let's not get it twisted. Our receivers are catching balls better this year because there's a quarterback that throws a lot more catchable of a ball.
That's a good point that has not been made. Cade's football is more catchable than Deacon's.
Deacon,
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. And Spencer Petras and Spencer Petras.
Yes, I was just coming, Cory. Thank you. And I just I'm going to name drop a little bit, and I'm going to flatter Don a little bit. And I wanted to pair Mark Bortz up with Jay Hilgenberg first off, but Super Bowl, we've already talked about this, Don. Anyway, Billy Happel, Scott Helverson, Keith Chappelle, and then quarterbacks like Hartlieb, Chuck Long. I mean, those guys didn't throw missiles, and yet those were good receivers too. But which is it, the chicken or the egg, or both?
Keith Chappelle, poetry in motion.
Yes,
smooth as butter. He was a good one.
Delightful to watch when you rarely could. Mostly you listened on the radio with Jim Zabel or back
One
then.
of my regrets, incidentally, Keith and Gordy were junior college teammates, and it's really unfair. Gordy was part of the 81 team, as you know. Keith played really, really well in 79 and 80 and was done. And we hate that Keith missed out on the 81 season because he deserved to be part of that.
For sure, for sure. So just getting back to the theme of don't get it twisted. I want to argue with Cory a little bit here, or just bounce this off of him on Cade's mobility and how he wanted to look at the other option because of a mobility factor that might pair well with this new offense.
That's not the only reason, but go ahead.
I would argue that Cade showed great mobility and great elusive and strength. I mean, to break tackles.
Well, you're used to watching Spencer Petras, Deacon Hill, Nate Stanley. That's part of the problem. You're used to watching those guys. I'm just telling you right now, Brendan is more mobile. I agree. Cade showed above what I would have expected out of a guy coming off 2 knee injuries, but I'm just telling you at a fall camp that almost everybody, I think everybody that I talked to said Brendan is still more mobile and quicker. So that's go ahead, but that's not the only reason why I would have liked to have seen Brendan.
Right. Oh, for sure. Because hey, anybody can get hurt, and we don't want to be crippled and have somebody that hasn't, is totally green. Well, just hasn't shaken any rust off. I mean, and take it up another notch. Marco Lainez is about as mobile and elusive. I mean, I want to see him on the field in games this year. I mean, just give him a package. Do like Michigan with Orgy, and they put him in for a one Wildcat or whatever it is. But I respect Kirk's preferences, and I'm a KF diehard, and I'll die on every hill.
Die on that Deacon Hill. I mean, that hill. Die on that hill, Cory. Just
so.
Let's not forget our leading rusher in our bowl game was our quarterback who played only 1 quarter.
Who was that? Who are we talking about, Don?
Marco. I think he had 64 yards rushing in the 4th quarter.
Yeah.
That was a show that he put on. I mean, they couldn't stop him. It strikes your fancy. It strikes your curiosity as to what could be with that kid.
Here's a question for you, Cory. If you were the OC, do you think you could design a couple of plays maybe that are specific for Marco?
Yes. I would design a couple of plays that are specific for Brendan, maybe more than a couple, and I design a couple that are specific to Marco. Yes, absolutely.
And there was the new Kirk back 3-4 years ago. And do you remember? So new Kirk was going for it on 4th down. He was doing some things that were just added a little more fun to the game.
It's called a midlife crisis.
Now, another one was Phil Parker, and maybe he hit his midlife crisis because do you remember on 3rd down when we'd have this frenzy of guys on 3rd down all standing up in this chaotic formation that had no structure to it? And it was pretty effective. I mean, if you recall.
Raider package you talking about?
Yeah.
Is that...
Thank you. And
the only thing I'll say about the new Kirk, a lot of that stuff came under LeVar Woods, like 2017, 2018. They had a lot of special teams fakes, and it wasn't just the offense. And I just wonder, that lines up timeline with when Brian was made the OC. Remember, Brian was made the OC in 17. And I just wonder, like, was there a connection, even though those were gambles made on special teams? Because I've asked LeVar Woods, I've asked him since then, why don't we see that stuff anymore? Why did we see that for 2 years? Why was your unit faking punts, faking kicks? I mean, remember the play against Minnesota where they spread everybody out and you had the long snapper who was a lefty toss it left to TJ Hawkinson, who went end around and scored. I believe it was a 2-point it was a touchdown. They were lined up for a field goal inside the 10. And he goes end around off of a left-handed. It was just a weird. They had a fake field goal pass to Epinesa at one point. They had a touchdown over the shoulder of Sam Brinks. They were doing a lot of that stuff. And
Yeah,
they don't do it anymore.
Who's our washed up walk on? Shame on me for not remembering his name. They got
Tyler Kluver.
Yeah, Kluver.
Yeah, he caught the polecat. That was 2017. That's what I'm saying. That was happening left and right. It was not just a one or two-time thing.
It was very entertaining, and I think it adds a little bit of fun, creative imagination, and it's kind of throws a few endorphins into the mind. It's this unknown of what might be. It makes it fun. You do make a good point, and I would, if I had to bet, I would bet that Patriot way, no nonsense, militant type structure and straight laced. Maybe Brian brought that tone in.
Well, I was more so thinking that, and I'm just extrapolating here, I was more so thinking that perhaps that lined up with Brian's tenure as OC, and it was just kind of like Kirk was riding a high. Like, my son's the OC. Let's just well, I don't want to, I'm trying to use a phrase that's appropriate and not, you know what I'm saying? Like, pedal to the metal. Let's just throw it all out there. Brian's here. My boy's the OC, and let's go. Let her rip. I don't know. Maybe that's totally off. I'm just surmising.
But it really made for a fun period of time because it was the unexpected, and Don can appreciate the unexpected. I mean, it's just something that people aren't expecting, and it makes it fun. It also makes it a challenge to deal with. My last let's don't get it twisted. Y.A. Black was double teamed, and I got to look at the film, but he handled the double teams, and his name deserves to be mentioned, because if it wasn't for him taking all the double teams, Graves wouldn't have had 3 sacks. And Graves even mentioned that. And a credit to Graves for being a great team player, spreading the love. But my last, I'm going to end with this. RVZ, Don. Do you picture RVZ? And I want to contaminate the context of this question with 7 Got 6, Marvin McNutt, 2009, Michigan State, where he left everybody at Michigan State looking like this. Okay. And when he ran that slant, now Marvin was about the size of RVZ, I think 6'4", 200. Marvin on Twitter said, "Oh, I wasn't that as good as him as a sophomore." That's Marvin being modest. He's a great guy. But my question is this, from a tactical standpoint, is there a greater use of that 6'4" guy on an outbound 50-50 ball sideline pass for the touchdown? Or is that an opportunity for that inside slant? And now you've got a tall target that, say, a shorter quarterback like Cade can see him in the end zone on like a quick hit slant. Or is it a mix? I mean, what's your take on how to best utilize an RBZ, a guy that may not be a speedster and may not get the greatest separation, but he can make a good break, get a little bit of separation? Do you see that best used as a 50-50 sideline pass, or do you see it best used unlike an inside slant that such as Marvin McNutt beating Michigan State in 2009, or a mix? But how do you best use that guy? And I'm talking goal line to get the touchdown.
And Cory, I'm going to let you slide and let Don answer that. Thank you for being here for both shows. And I will be back after the game on Saturday. So it won't be Kyle and Don. It'll be Cory and Don. So Cory, and Don. So anyways.
In disarray. So thank you for bringing order back.
Cory. Appreciate it, sir. Don, you have an answer to that regarding your prototypical X, as they call them?
Well, a big receiver should be effective on slants. And you heard me earlier talking about a bang route. A bang route is just a deeper version of a slant. You can go play action. You're familiar with RPOs. RPOs sometimes an option is to throw the bang route in behind the linebacker if the quarterback is convinced that he can do it. So I think any inside breaking route makes sense for a big receiver like Reese. Other possibilities, of course, let's face it, there's a real place if you're tall, assuming you can really become effective with your releases. A fade route, of course, is very difficult to cover. And for that matter, if you're covering a tall receiver on a fade route, if you're covering the guy, then you simply throw what you're familiar with, Cory, the back shoulder fade. You throw the ball behind him and outside, and he reacts to the ball. And, of course, the defender has no idea that you were going to throw back shoulder because you can't defend both. If you can defend a fade route, you can't defend the back shoulder. And that's why it's so effective with a tall receiver in particular. One of the impressive things about that pass that should not have been thrown, there were other people that should have had a better chance at the ball than Reese did. And yet Reese went up and got it. And it wasn't even in a convenient place. It was more over here that he got it. It was like he was picking something off the grocery store shelf. It was up high. He just reached up and grabbed it and pulled it back.
Yeah. I was going to say it's like when you play with a bunch of little kids, and they're jumping up here like this and you just, what I'm saying, right, Don?
It kind of gave you that feeling, didn't it?
Yeah.
He took it away from him because after all, it was meant to be his ball. So
was it meant to be his ball? You think it was intended for him or was it intended for Luke? Like I say, it was not a great decision and not a great throw.
No, when that ball went up, I would have said the odds of them getting it are about the same as the odds of us getting it.
Yeah.
And we were fortunate that they didn't play the ball well, and Reese did. That was the difference in the play.
Folks, we're speaking about RTI Threads because they're a bunch of Western Iowa athletes, and we'd love to see Reese Vandersee on that list. We may have some news on that here moving forward. We'll see. But definitely check out RTI Threads selection. Aaron Graves, Jacob Gill, a couple of guys who had great performances yesterday. Aaron Graves was a man-child inside. Carson Shire, Zach Lutmer, players of the future. Check them all out at rtithreads.com. Complete apparel for all those guys. And I don't want to forget about the super chat from Pugmaster. He says, Cory is the next Jim Zabel. Mark it down. Okay. Thank you, Pugmaster. Do appreciate the compliment. Do appreciate the super chat. And Tim says, think Weegan would have scored on the punt return even without the block in the back. As in, was it necessary to touch that defender? I think he would have scored even without that block in the back. I don't think that made the difference, but that happens a lot. Sometimes those illegal blocks in the back, they don't really impact the play as much as you would think.
If all those blockers would just understand, even if you don't get a great block, if you just kind of get in the way for a split second, a guy like Wishing can be gone. Yeah. So don't feel like you have to clip a guy. Don't push him in the back because last time I checked, there are 8 officials out there and they're all looking, and the odds of one of them seeing you are pretty high.
Folks, be sure. I know Kyle showed this to everybody yesterday, but our final plug for RTI Threads. Be sure to check out the RTI Threads apparel. They've working with a bunch of Hawkeyes, some Creighton Blue Jays. I think they've got, you can pull up their NIL athletes list, Trey Alexander being one, Ryan Kalkbrenner, but look at the selection. And Cooper DeJean still has an apparel line. RTI Threads still working with Cooper DeJean. You can check it all out and take a look, take a gander at some of their apparel, their custom. Look at the Aaron Graves Gravedigger logo you can get on a various number of pieces of merchandise, including clothing. And for your children, for you, for your spouse, whatever the case may be, great gifts. And you can also check out the official line that just dropped of Jacob Gill and see his logo and the work that's being done to support NIL and support this show. And again, an Iowa company, RTI Threads. Check them out over at rtithreads.com and browse the website. And RTI Threads also, you see this link up here. If you're in Western Iowa, check out their new their new restaurant, their restaurant chain. And they just opened the one up in Spirit Lake. I'm going to hit that up here when I go up to Okoboji here soon. Bob and Ellen's. So great stuff. RTI Threads is a great company, and they've been supporting the show now. Going on 2 or 3 years now? Great stuff. rtithreads.com. Don, thank you for being here. I know you put in a long series of shows, couple of shows, and I will be back with you next week for the Cyhawk game. I will not be at Kinnick for the Cyhawk game, but I'm sure it will be loud. I know you'll be one of the people that will be making it loud. So thank you for your expertise. And what better way to finish our show by maybe a final plug for Iowa State? Any parting words on a Cyhawk game that has potential playoff implications down the line? These are a couple of teams. I know Iowa State didn't look great at times against North Dakota, but this is a team that has received some preseason talk regarding the 12-team expanded playoff. Certainly Iowa's in that conversation as well. This could be a game that has implications late in the season.
I think so. I just know the recent history, of course. It's really highly likely that it'll be a one-score game. We need to anticipate it's going to be a fight to the finish. Anything on our part, any attitude that's not along those lines is the wrong attitude to have, because I really believe Iowa State's going to show up and they're going to represent well. We better do the same. I'll say it that way. It's going to be another tight game, I'm afraid to say.
Do you have a score prediction or, oh
boy.
This is an Iowa State team that can stretch the field. I mean, this is an Iowa State team that does throw the ball effectively. And here's a guy who's matured a lot in Rocco Beck since the last time Iowa saw him. And they caused him problems, but this is an Iowa State team that can get the ball down the field.
I'll go 20-17 on the strength of 2 long-range field goals.
I think Iowa wins by more than 3 points. I think Iowa wins by 2 scores.
Great. I'm going to say better tonight.
I'm not making my prediction right now, but I think Iowa wins by 2 scores.
Well, and let's not forget, you are in the Hawkeye of the Storm, so you have a better idea than I do of what's going on with the Cyclones.
Well, the game will be in Iowa City next week, and myself and Coach Patterson will recap it here from the Hawkeye of the Storm Iowa postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Coach, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you for taking the time on a Sunday.
Pleasure's all mine, Cory.
Folks, for Coach Don Patterson, I'm Cory Brada. Another season of Iowa postgame with Coach Patterson is here. Keep it locked right here. Subscribe, like the video. We'll talk to you next Saturday.